Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. And we're doing it on a Thursday yet again because Tomer has some important business that he has to do. And I'm going to go to another Snake Appreciation Day this weekend. So it works out for me. Anybody got any opening comments?
Finally, we're finishing with the first part of Chronicles.
Yep.
Okay,
Chronicles.
I may need to do grocery shopping later today. I'm hoping to put it off. Should I be eating this? Because so help me, if I get another list, I'm going to start screaming into the microphone and not in a pretty
Honestly,
operatic way.
You should have
You
eaten
are
that 30
getting
minutes
their
ago
list.
so that the show would be more amusing.
Yeah,
And I'm getting off correctly because I'm drinking a full-grown scallywag.
very good, sir.
I mean, we only have 27, which is a list. And then 28 and 29 are the more like interesting bits, which I don't think in my commentary are 5 pages long. It's probably longer.
Should I begin the reading today?
I
I
would
don't
recommend
know
that
if it's a
do
great
the
idea.
No, you
looking at some of these.
Well,
I think
you
I would
do
do
need
the-
to torture Tomer for making us reschedule. How dare you have other commitments?
I can torture him a little bit
Okay.
later.
Nobody wants me to
Anyway.
read Jashubim, son of Zabdiel.
Close enough.
Why not?
All right, chapter 27. The number of Israelites, chiefs of clans, officers of thousands and hundreds, and their clerks, who served the king in all matters of the divisions, who worked in monthly shifts during all the months of the year, each division 24,000. Over the first division for the first month, Yeshabam, son of Zavdiel, his division had 24,000. Of the sons of Peretz, he, the chief of all the officers of the army, for the first month. Over the division of the second month, Dodai, the Achothite, Mikla, Achothite. I mean, it's a weird combination of English and Hebrew. It's
right?
Achochi, so
Yeah, exactly. Every time in the Bible where it has "ite" at the end, the Hebrew doesn't have "ite." It's just
No.
"e."
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not like Benjaminites. It's just Binyamini or something like that. It's just like "e" at the end. So yeah.
So it would be like belonging to Benjamin.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Of Benjamin.
So Ahochi becomes Ahohite in English. Yeah. Mikloth was chief officer of his division. His division had 24,000. The third army officer for the third month, Benayahu, son of Jehoiada, the chief priest, his division had 24,000. That was Benayahu, one of the warriors of the 30 and over the 30, and his division was Amizavad, his son. The fourth, for the fourth month, Asahel, brother of Joab, or Job, and his son Zebediah, after him, his division had 24,000. The fifth, for the fifth month, the officer Shamhut, the Yisra'ite, his division had 24,000. The sixth, for the sixth month, Ira, son of Ikesh, from Tekoa, the Tekoite, his division had 24,000. The seventh, for the seventh month, was Pelet, the Pelonite of the Ephraimites. His division had 24,000. The eighth, for the eighth month, Sibbecai, the Hushasite of Zerach, his division had 24,000. The ninth, for the ninth month, Aviezer, the Anatotite of Benjamin, his division had 24,000. The tenth, for the 10th month, was Marai, the Netophatite of Zerach, his division had 24,000. The 11th, for the 11th month, Benahiel, the Pirathonite of the Ephraimites, his division had 24,000. The 12th, for the 12th month, was Heldai, the Netophatite of Othniel, his division had 24,000. Over the tribes of Israel, for Reuben, the chief officer, Eliezer, son of Zichri, for Simeon, Shephatiahu, son of Makah, Levi, Chashaphia, son of Kemuel, and Aaron, Zadok. Judah,
Elihu of the brothers of David, Issachar, Omri son of Michael, Zebulun, Ishmayahu son of Avadyahu, Naphtali, Yerimoth the son of Azriel, Ephraimites, Hoshea son of Azazyahu, the half tribe of Manasseh, Joel son of Pedaiah, or Pedaiahu, the half Manasseh in Gilead, Iddo son of Zechariah, or Zechariah, Benjamin, Yaasiel son of Avner, Dan, for Dan, Azarel son of Yeroham. These were the officers of the tribes of Israel. David did not take a census of those under 20 years of age, for the Lord had promised to make Israel as numerous as the stars of heaven. Joab, son of Zeruiah, did begin to count them, but he did not finish. Wrath struck Israel on account of this, and the census was not entered into the count of the Chronicles of King David. Over the royal treasuries, Asmavet, son of Adiel, over the treasuries in the country, in the towns, the hamlets, and the citadels, Jonathan, son of Uzziah. Over the field laborers in agricultural work, Ezri, son of Klov. Over the vineyards, Shimei, the Ramathite, and over the produce in the vineyards for wine cellars, Zavdi, the Shiphathite.
Shifmite.
Shifmite? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It was Shifmi.
Yeah, Shifmite. Yeah, okay. That makes sense. Over the olive trees and the sycamores in the Shephelah, Baal-Hanan, the Gederite. Over the oil stores, Joash. Over the cattle pasturing in Sharon, Shirtai the Sharonite. And over the cattle in the valleys, Shaphat, son of Adlai. Over the camels, Ovil the Yishmaelite. And over the she-asses, Yechdayahu the Meronothite. Over the flocks, Yaziz the Hagarite. All these were stewards of the property of King David. Jonathan, David's uncle, was a counselor, a master, and a scribe. Yechiel, son of Chachmoni, was with the king's sons. Achitophel was a counselor to the king. Hushai, the Archite, was the king's friend. And Achitophel, after Achitophel, were Jehoiada, son of Benaiah, and Aviatar. The commander of the king's army was Joab.
These are not real names.
I mean, these ones aren't too bad. There's a
What
couple
happened
of, like,
to Eddie?
there's a couple of names
there
where
you
at
go.
least- yeah, there's a couple of names or
Vinny.
maybe like epithets that kind of are like his job and his name kind of match a bit, which seems a bit suspicious. That's suspicious.
That's
Um,
suspicious. That's weird. It does seem like though it reminds me a bit of how like the name Smith became so popular because blacksmith, goldsmith, any kind of smith, the family name would inevitably become Smith, at least in English. And then you'd end up with all these last names that were indicative of, oh, look at the ducky, I want a rubber duck. Apparently we need a shrine of rubber ducks.
Oh,
And
wait, hold on.
they also had
Nothing says that.
they named some of their people after superheroes, because I remember there was Goldman.
Oh yeah, no, that's just a banker.
Nothing says being badass than having a rubber ducky.
A badass
Yeah,
rubber ducky with a cool hat.
Mm.
So like one
Yeah.
of the examples that I think is, I don't know, maybe it's not suspicious, maybe it makes sense. It made sense to have someone. So for example, we have Ovil the Yishmaelite over the camels.
Hey,
it's
look at
like-
Lawrence.
Oh, you also drive a Jeep?
Awesome! Pirate rubber duckies. You know what that means? It means they're followers of the Flying Spaghetti Monster.
Yeah, I have not even seen Lawrence's Wrangler. So
No, these I got in one of those claw machines. This was a couple
Ah.
years ago, and I had to get the pirate ones because my gimmick at the time was being a pirate. I am not going to delve into that one more, but
He
did
looks
you
like
at
a
least-
pirate. Just
did
go with it.
Lawrence, did you at least get good rope tying skills out of it?
Oh please, I had good rope tying skills before. Anyway,
That there are levels and shipwrights. The people who they have a level.
well,
Are
I
you
like,
at
couldn't
level?
tell you the level, but
I live pretty close to the venue for the London. What do they call it? London Rope Sunday. I don't remember. Yeah, it's pretty fun. It's like casual.
Oh,
You know, you just rock
okay,
up
well,
and then.
if I'm ever in
Okay.
London without my mother, I will call you up and see if we can go to that.
What did you say about the camels, Isaac, or about Obil?
Oh, so like the guy over the camels is a Ishmaelite.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe that's just like an example of like, you know, someone who lived among the Ishmaelites or someone who was actually the Ishmaelite himself.
I do like Sudorashi, who says that that the Ishmaelites who knows about camels or about the business of camels.
The business of camels.
And also Tagum, which literally says Obil the Arab, because the Ishmaelites are Arabs. But
it's like if you have one Arab in the town, he's like, yeah, that's the Arab. We have one. Yay.
I mean, in the Bible, it does use the word, like the word Arav, before. Like it didn't refer to Arabs; it was referring to, like people living a sort of Bedouin lifestyle. I don't know if there is direct connection.
There's a
is there?
Bedouin.
Actually, very interesting
It's
to
a
note.
caravan. It's more like merchants than anything else.
It's interesting to note that in old South Arabic, Abal means gather livestock together as booty, and it can also mean camels.
Oh.
Oh, the name itself is like South Arabian for camel.
Yeah.
I know the reason that Islam would let you have 4 wives is because many of the Bedouin merchants, they would like travel and they'd have homes in several locations and like 4 seasons. Basically, you'd have like 4 homes, and then you were allowed to have a wife at each home to you know, keep it all together. And hopefully she could have 4 husbands as long as she kept them on an alternating rotation, but not technically.
Right.
Anyway,
Not officially.
yeah, official. But at the same time, you're looking at that going,
Who's that
you know,
painting?
maybe they had like a Bedouin style merchant who brought the camels through, or the asses, or whatever.
Is there a connection between the modern, like, well, not that modern, the word for Arabs as a ethnic group and the biblical word Arab meaning merchant?
I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things where you can definitely
Or is
see.
it like they sounded similar, so the Hebrew name the Hebrew
Well, and
for Arab
sometimes
is
a group of
same
people
word.
end up doing something a lot because, you know, the transitory lifestyle lends itself to being a merchant. I hate to say it, but Jews in Europe and banking, because, you know, they weren't allowed to lend. They were the only ones allowed to lend interest. They were the only ones allowed to lend an interest to Christians for a long time.
Yeah.
So naturally,
Apparently
a lot
the
became
Arab-
bankers. How are you going to do?
Yeah.
You know.
Apparently, in Arabic, the word Arab also comes from like inhabitants of the desert or Bedouins. So
Yeah.
Which is a naturally, you
which
have
makes
to
sense.
be
Araba
transitory.
means like the
Yeah.
Araba means like the dry place. So
Yeah.
people who live in the desert are Arabs or
And you're going to move to wherever the water goes.
I
never
kind of
even
live
made
in the desert.
connection.
Kinda.
I mean,
Yeah.
so do I, but there's a lake, so we're fine.
Okay, so should I start, or is anybody else?
I don't know. I
something else
did
to say?
have a couple things to mention. So we are getting, of course, it looks like an entire list of basically governance for the city and all their, and or at least a good chunk of their proceedings. There were a couple of things I wanted to mention. So in verse 6, when they're talking about Benaniah, the one of the 30, right? I forget the verse that it was. It may have been First Chronicles. But there were the 30, but but it also made the implication that they
1125.
had like the 3 as well.
Oh yeah,
Where
the 30 and the 3 were greater than the 30, but this
Yeah.
one was the leader of the 30, but did not attain
it
to the
chapter
3.
11?
And
yeah, so I don't remember if his name specifically pops up there
I think it
in that other
does.
passage with the 30.
I definitely remember Benaiah.
Well, I
Benaiah
think it
in-
lists the 30, right? But then
Yeah.
at some point.
I mean, if you check chapter
Um,
11, verse 25, it might have.
yeah, 1125. Mina shloshim heno nichbad hu.
He was the most honored. of
Heno
the
nichbad
13.
hu. Yeah.
Then while you guys look at that, I guess there was a couple more things I wanted to mention. So for the, I'll need a second to find it. But the one of the comments I wanted to make was specifically on the. Okay, so what's his name? Hushai the Archite was the king's friend.
Yeah.
So
Probably a
in
job title.
modern parlance, that's hilarious because it implies he just had the one friend. But if we take a look at how friend is used in other late texts, like in Job, was it in Job that he was called a friend of God? Was that Job?
no.
Or-
Abraham was the friend of God.
Abraham was
David-
a friend of God?
Yeah, David was a man after God's own heart. Abraham was the friend of God. But yeah, it's so what we're saying is this is a special friend.
Yeah, a special friend.
Were
yes.
they roommates?
They might have been roommates, yeah.
They were
Or-
best
Or
friends.
fucking each other. So
Yeah,
but
one
this is like
presumes.
an elevated status either way because if
He's in the story of
Mm.
Bathsheba. I think David asks him whether God would forgive him or something, and he asks his friend, and his friend replies that yes, he will or something.
By which he means, will you forgive me?
Yeah, I mean,
Oh.
Klein notes that several scholars have proposed that the title "the King's Friend" is more formal than might appear on first reading. Early on, it represented a court title, but later was connected with an official duty, probably as a counselor to the king. Hence, the titles for the contemporaries Achitophel and Hushai are synonyms. Donner claimed that the corresponding Egyptian office of friend was Tsemer or Semer. Mettinger showed that this parallel is inappropriate since the Egyptian word does not mean friend, and he offered the Egyptian title Rach Nashot, something like that, as a more appropriate parallel, which means king's acquaintance, etc., etc. And you should also note that in Alexandrinus, it reads Ho protos philos, which is
okay,
used
so he's
in
like a
the
loved one, a friend. That could be translated either way, like a friend or a loved one. Yeah.
Knoppers notes that it's the title used in the Alexandrian court.
Yeah, it
So
could be
his-
like
his
referring to like
beloved.
it could be like a counselor or for external matters versus and one for like personal matters.
But we are talking about a beneficial friendship.
Yes,
Yes.
definitely
Yeah,
friends.
They are friends with
benefits.
Yes. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up was this issue of the census pops up again,
It was
right?
yeah.
So-
Maybe he got dental out of it.
This time it wasn't
They're still
wasn't
salty.
Satan stirring anyone up, but where was it? So Joab, right? Joab, son of Zeruiah, began to count them, and we're talking specifically about those above 20 years of age.
Well,
So
yeah.
I'm guessing this would be
War.
the army.
It's a military
Yeah.
census.
Yeah.
I just
Uh,
want to know, like, what God is so fucking salty, so salty about this census, dude.
Yeah, I mean,
Fuck.
yeah, I mean, I've noted.
I mean,
in
it
the
happened in the
commentary
desert
that-
as well, right? It's a Moses story
Mm.
retelling sort of thing, maybe, or
I don't.
and
think it
it's
was
this
quite a
idea that
census,
like
actually.
this idea of like counting for not a good reason. If you're counting
Right.
to decide how many people are going to work in the temple, or you're actually facing a war and you need to count, your soldiers, and that kind of makes sense. But if it's just like as a sign of like,
So I
look how
know what
big
I'm
we
dealing
are.
with. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, as I noted in the commentary, Klein notes that like almost all commentators say that verses 23 and 24 are an attempt to exonerate David for the census.
Yeah,
Chapter
because it
21.
looks like he's what was it? He did not count those below 20 years of age. For the Lord had promised to make Israel as numerous as the stars of heaven. Yeah, and then Joab is the one to start counting them. And then the number was not entered into the account of the annals.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Something else
Looks
in the
very
journal.
like no, he didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, though Knoppers writes that that the purpose of the explanation in verses 23 and 24 may be not so much to exonerate David as it is to distinguish this complete and successful census from the earlier incomplete and failed census. By observing the minimum age for military musters, this census conformed to divine legislation, Numbers 1, 3, and 45. As such, it may mark another occasion in David's reign in which an initial failure was reserved or followed by a later success. For
Wait,
example,
but this one
13:1
says
through
they
11.
didn't finish though.
Or they didn't finish the one tribe worth it. Yeah, this is, I mean, I know that we talked about how there's a taboo about counting people and it's bad luck and whatever.
It also gets you really cranky when you don't finish.
Uh-huh.
Believe me, I know.
Okay, so I think I should start with verse
Oh, we got a
1.
couple of comments.
Alright.
Let me get
Yeah,
those up
sure.
first. Okay, so we have Tro Satan 616.
Pretty sure that was from like a different commenter. Peter forgot to delete something.
Oh, sure.
It's probably just Satan, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Satan's.
For some reason, it just copied it that way. I'm just looking at the chat. No clue why.
Whatever you
Satan.
say.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
that-
it's, anyway,
yeah.
the comment is ask Lawrence about the bronze scroll.
Ugh.
He thinks it's a pirate map.
First of all, he's thinking of the copper scroll. Second of all, no.
Which he said in
I
the
do not.
subsequent comment.
This is heresy. I will not stand for this.
Dishonor, sir. Dishonor on your cow. Do not slight the noble name of Lawrence in this manner. I shall come after thee with the stick of truth, which I don't have with me. Where's my riding crop?
You have a riding crop?
I showed it to you.
course
I
she
got it at
does.
that Christmas party. There was a whole story.
Yeah, Christmas.
It was an adult Christmas party, and it was very fun. There was also a tied-up Santa. It was very funny.
Go ahead, Tomer.
Yeah, okay. We'll start on verse 1. Knoppers comments, quote, according to some commentators like Rem, Williamson, and Steins, the opening rubric points towards a secondary stage of composition for part, if not all, of the chapter because the leadership figures mentioned, the ancestral heads, the officers of thousands and of the hundreds, and the officials do not figure in the earlier Davidic convocation and census in 23:3-6a. A second argument against originality has to do with the general, if not secular, appointments, which are thought not to reflect the final stage of David's reign. Rather than dealing with secular affairs, this entire chapter is, according to Steins, part of a final cultically oriented stratum in the book, as we've seen in chapter 27, 2 Chronicles 30-31, etc., that engages earlier material within the work, for example, in verses 26 and 27 forward, and seeks to relate certain practices and figures to ordinances found in Pentateuchal law.
Yeah, I was thinking that this chapter kind of comes across as like, oh, this is how David had his government set up. This should be a model for us. Blah blah blah. You know, these are the roles. These are the divisions. We should probably do something similar if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I see Lawrence dropped out.
Mm-hmm.
You can do a comment just so we can wait for him to show up again. Maybe I don't. Oh, never mind. Continue. On verses 2-15, commentators note that the names of all the chieftains mentioned in this section appear in the list of David's warriors, 11:10 forward and 2 Samuel 23:8 forward. Knoppers notes that some, like Benzinger and Kittel, deem verses 2 through 15 to be a duplicate of names appearing in chapter 11, and therefore secondary. Japhet notes that while Yadin suggested that this list preserves an authentic reflection of historical conditions under David, most scholars challenge its authenticity for the following reasons. Quote, 1. No supporting evidence is available for any period of Israel's history. This is, in fact, an argument from silence, but scholars tend to regard it as valid since not even the slightest hint of such a system is to be found in extant sources. 2. For many scholars, a military system of this kind presupposes a degree of centralization and sophistication which wasn't possible during David's regime. 3. Many scholars are reluctant to accept the possibility that authentic documents of David's time were still available to the chronicler. And 4, the system conforms to the broader idea of divisions, quote unquote, which dominates the administrative concepts of the chronicler, or for others, the post-chronistic editor. Although the divisions number 12 rather than 24, the principle of rotation applied to the king's service parallels that of the priests and Levites in the temple. Many, therefore, regard the system as a chronistic or later reconstruction, based on the chronicler's own views. This parallelism between the two systems, although certainly tenable to some extent, should be further scrutinized. On 16 through 22, Dirksen comments, quote, "It is generally acknowledged that the list does not represent a historical situation. Strikingly, the tribes of Gad and Asher are absent, but the number of 12 is maintained by splitting up the tribe of Joseph into Ephraim and East and West Manasseh. What is cause and what is effect here? The writer himself may have introduced this subdivision because his source did not list 12 tribes. He may also have adopted the list of tribes from a source and omitted the last two names, Gad and Asher, compared to 2 and Genesis 35:26, because he had already reached the number of 12. Japhet finds not 12 but 13 tribal units in this passage. The second view has the balance of probability because if the source came up short on names, an independent addition of Gad and Asher would have been more obvious, but nothing else can be said about the reason or cause. The use of a source is strongly suggested by verses 23 forward, which explains the absence of concrete numbers in the annals of King David. It is impossible to see why the writer would give a rather laborious explanation for the absence of something in a fictitious source. We can no longer determine to what extent the original material has been revised. Verse 17 offers evidence of revision in mentioning the Aaronites.
Even if it was from a secondary source, that had claimed to be an accounting of the stuff from David's time, it's entirely possible that there could have been pages missing at the time of the chronicler and he had to but they missed the thing, but it's totally part of, because I've noticed the commitment to the 12s is very, it's like when we round to 10, everything is in 12s, but it does have very magical, emblematic meaning.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Well, 12 months specifically is very, very important to them.
12 signs of the zodiac. 12 bucks I have left to give.
What's really funny? There is in the SBL Study Bible, there is a picture next to this. It is called the 12 Tribes of Israel. It's a mosaic from the 20th century in East Jerusalem, apparently. And it essentially looks like, a zodiac chart, but it has symbols for all the tribes of Israel, and in the middle there is a menorah, which is interesting. Well, like I said, it's from the 20th century.
There's one that has like Apollo in the middle, no? Which is
there might be, but this one definitely does not have Apollo in it.
Yeah. I mean, the one with Apollo doesn't have, well, not in the same design. It doesn't have like the 12 tribes. It has the classical zodiac, and then it has
there is
northeast, south, and west representations or something. I don't remember.
I mean, there's a synagogue in Tripoli which has like a mosaic with the
Apollon.
Yeah, I forgot the zodiac.
There's more than one. There's definitely more than one with a zodiac wheel mosaic, and
Yeah.
in it.
And also
And
in
more than
in
one
Bet
with a
Alpha
sun.
as well.
And also more than one with a personified sun character in the middle, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah. I think there is for example, in Bet Alpha there is a character in the middle of the mosaic, which I don't really know what she represents.
I think
Okay,
I think it's supposed to be
so
Apollo. I think that's, which is interesting, but yeah.
Well, no, I think I actually
They
have
like
a reference
adopted
to
him
that.
as like almost like a.
Oh yeah, that's so funny. I flipped.
oh, it's
basically right
Helios.
to it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
Did you
detail
make
of
a page in your
mosaic
book?
from the Beth Alpha synagogue.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
Oh,
That
that is it. That's it. Yes.
There we go.
So
I think
that's
it's
not 20th
identified with
century,
Apollo
it's like-
because he's got this one specifically. He has like 4 horses, right?
yeah.
Called his heavenly chariot.
yeah, the
Yeah,
large
Helios,
middle panel.
actually, yeah.
The large middle panel is most surprising, featuring the sun god in his chariot drawn by 4 horses, encircled by the 12 signs of the zodiac, whose names are written in Hebrew.
Yeah.
Reminds me, I have to read that fictional series about the 4 horsemen.
Revelation? No, I'm kidding.
No,
Lawrence has a
no,
really
this
good
one's a
video about it.
romance.
Lawrence has a really good video about the 4 horsemen. I don't know how romantic it is though.
It's not very
No,
romantic.
no,
Nothing
it's,
about it is sexy.
No, God does not do sexy well. He's
I don't know. A romance involving 4 horsemen?
I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm saying God's not good at it.
Okay.
Mm.
I would watch that.
because they were centaurs, or because they were.
You would.
Somehow I'm not surprised.
Were they called horsemen because they were like centaurs, a half man, half horse, or was it they just had the?
I'm sure there's a
members of
biblical
a horse?
reference.
There's no, they were horses and riders, but there were chimeras with the faces of men in the angels. So maybe your centaur porn is actually biblically accurate angel porn. There you go.
How did we get to this point?
The eyes on the angel are all the viewers around the world watching online.
Oh God. Oh, that is not my kink.
Then
Yeah,
Trevor and Wright, number 1, says, what is the point of the name changes of Abram to Abraham?
I mean,
Oh.
you're kind of late to the party here, aren't you?
A little bit, yeah.
A
But
quick
this
one
actually is a
it's
quick
like
answer. You do name changes if you are establishing power over somebody. You give someone a new name when you are their new leader.
That's how
And
BDSM works.
it's also a Hebrew like kind of
Or
I
cults.
don't know what you would call it. Like a it's so like the Avram just means father of like a exalted father, which is very suspicious as we know. And then Avraham is just one letter change, and it kind of implies that he's the father of many, because in Hebrew, Hamon means many. And I
Because
think in
he
the
a
verse-
hoe. He a man hoe.
well, he only had a couple of children, but well, in the end, it was more, wasn't it? The second concubine, who some say is the same as the first one, but whatever.
I mean, it's gossip. It rarely ends very accurately.
Anyways, Tomer, go ahead.
Yeah. So on verses 23 and 24, Klein notes that almost all commentators agree that verses 23 and 24 are an attempt to exonerate David for the census he took in chapter 21. Thus, these verses were added by someone later than the chronicler and therefore not historical. For example, Japhet notes the awkward connection between their number in verse 23 and the leaders of the tribes of Israel in verse 22. He notes that in Numbers 1, Klein notes that in Numbers 1, the head of each tribe was to be involved in the taking of the census in Numbers 1:4. And this might explain the reason for listing the tribal heads just before. According to verse 23, David only counted those over 20 years of age. And the reason given for that is that he trusted in the promises of God to give him as many descendants as the stars of the heavens. Klein asks, quote, if he had really trusted those promises, why would he even count those over 20? End quote. Thus, verse 23 is, quote, an evident attempt to remove the guilt of David that premeets the account in chapter 21.
In a way that doesn't make a whole
Permeates.
hell of a lot of sense. I mean, maybe the only thing that numerous descendants could be like maybe a justification for conquest, which connects to the army. That's the only line of reasoning I can bring to connect those two.
Okay, so on verse 24, the book of the Annals of King David. Hebrew Bible reads, in the number, in Hebrew, bemispar, of the Chronicles for King David.
I think
so-
only Jonathan knew the annals of King David.
Or David's hemorrhoids, right?
Annals.
Annals,
No, I
whatever.
think Annals is pretty good though. So
Yeah.
He referred to them as speed bumps.
It's fascinating how a single N can do the entire trick. So Septuagint and Vulgate read in the book, in Hebrew Basefer, of histories of the days of King David. Most commentators follow Septuagint reading, with the Masoretic text Bamispar being a corruption of Sefer, influenced from the previous verse. The name Divrey HaYamim is the same name for the book of Chronicles and appears only here in Chronicles. Klein and Johnstone suggested that this book may be an allusion to chapter 21. And Targum reads, the number was not entered as a number in the Chronicles of King David. On 25 through 31, Dirksen comments, quote, verses 25 through 31 give the names of those who administer the royal possessions. Nothing suggests an ideological purpose, and it is therefore most likely that the passage derives from a source, possibly the one mentioned in verse 24. This says nothing, though, about the date of the information mentioned here. The last 3 verses mentioned some members of David's personal staff. The fictitious framework of David's old age in 23:1 has been entirely abandoned here. The author probably found this information in his source and adopted it with the earlier material. On 32 through 33, Japhet comments, quote, these verses mention 4 counselors who are closely attendant upon David. The total number of personnel mentioned in this short unit is 7, and this may not have been a coincidence. We could interpret this number in 2 ways. The first is to see in it a reflection of the Persian period, and the fact that the Persian king had 7 counselors, as we see in Esther 1 verses 10 and 14, though P. Bryant doubts the existence of such an assembly. This interpretation assumes that the source of the list is from the chronicler's time. The second is to see this number as another example of the biblical notion that 7 represents perfection. By this approach, the basis is literary, and it is doubtful if this passage represents historical circumstances.
I still think it's worth pointing out that secondary and even tertiary sources are a thing. There are writers who were very famous in their time, but the church burned all their books, and all we know of what they said is quotations in the people who were opposing their ideas, most of which were Christians, which means there's a 99% chance that they misrepresented absolutely every fucking thing about their opponent's position. So you can have quotations that are not from an original source, but are quoting the source that they got it from, which could have been contrived by them or not. You don't know. Unfortunately, with the somewhat interesting, history and how it comes down and weaves and dips and the things that are lost and saved and the randomness of some of that, it's really just, you can maybe place some probabilities, but they're very loose, even that.
Got another comment from Ronaldo Martinez, $4.99. Thank you. It says, are there any female angels in the Bible?
No, we have nothing to do with this shit.
I mean, there aren't that many named angels in the Old Testament, at least. And
yeah, Michael.
I mean, but there is one, maybe an angel is just a mess, and the whale that swallowed Jonah is both male and female. So
right, because it's a magic fish that God made for special purposes.
Just in one verse,
female
which
angels
is both fish and mammal.
Well, whale doesn't come up; it just says fish, right? So, but the Hebrew word for fish, dag, technically the feminine form would just be daga, and it's both those forms are used in the story. So, yeah, non-binary fish.
Yeah, I don't think angels
Well,
have.
they always pass as men when they're supposed to be human, because of course men had rights. But
Yeah.
there's either like
They're
a
assumed.
vague metrosexual skewed masculine but not too mask type of angel, or there's the existential dread chimera that we were talking about when I made the joke about centaur porn, which is like 4 different animals and 6 wings, and it's covered in eyes, and it's like what they're talking about when they say biblically accurate angel. It's something you look at it and just be like, can I meet Cthulhu instead? That would be less brain fucky.
Right. The Hayots, or I don't know what the English name for them is. The creature in Ezekiel's vision has the face of a man. The cherubim, on the other hand, there is in at least the Ark of the Covenant has a male and female cherub. But nice. I think traditionally, like in Judaism, angels don't have a sex. In essence, if that makes sense.
So they're male
they also
passing.
Don't have free will.
Yeah. So they're male passing.
I don't know.
Like,
I don't know where the sort of like Christian artwork, this like idea of like angels are, what's that word? Not ambidextrous.
Not asexual. What's not intersex. I'm thinking it's more the aesthetic word. They're kind of
What's it called when someone like you
androgynous?
Androgynous,
yeah.
The idea of Christian like angels being androgynous. I don't know where that comes from.
I mean, it
probably them being prudes.
Well, yeah, there's the prudes. You can give the theological reason that we shouldn't imagine angels as being sexual beings. That's obviously forbidden, and maybe we just we shouldn't look at it in that way, especially, which would make sense since there was that one sculptor who was hired by the Vatican to make a carving of Lucifer, and he made him so sexy that the women were all coming to mass more, and that made the Pope uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So he hired his brother, and his brother made a sexier Lucifer statue.
But
that I would totally bone.
Well, sin is supposed to be tempting.
Good.
There's a Gnostic text that says that angels are created every single time God speaks. So every single time he utters any word at all, a new angel is made.
But are any of them hot?
Well, they don't have wings yet, because once the angel is made, they have to sit around without wings until somebody rings a bell.
Actually, hold on. They are hot. They are hot because other texts that actually describe what angels look like usually describe them as being basically great big balls of fire. So yes, they are hot.
Trevor and Wright, number 2, I'm getting confused. This question is about the Book of Chronicles in general. What exactly is the Jewish perspective or a theological dispute on this subject that has been reformed within Jewish culture?
I don't understand the question.
I don't either.
Sorry, Trevor.
I understand the question. I don't think it's specific enough. Like regarding the entire Book of Chronicles.
I think most of the discussion is going to be about how do we reconcile the differences between Chronicles and the other books.
Yeah, what is the Jewish perspective or dispute that has been reformed? How is a dispute reformed?
I mean, we could talk about the status of Chronicles within Judaism. There is a section about it in McIver's commentary on the Targum. And there he writes that the status of Chronicles in Judaism is uncertain. We have no evidence for its regular use in synagogue services, and whether Spiro is right that Chronicles had once had a golden age before its eclipsed by Samuel through Kings, or whether Chronicles had always lived under its shadow. It does seem clear that at some point a special kind of interpretation was associated with Chronicles. So it's...
there's a reason why Jewish people put Chronicles at the end in the writing section.
Yeah, though
Esther and Ruth, rather than as part of the prophet section with like Samuel and Joshua.
Yeah, though in the Codex Leningrad and Aleppo, it's in the beginning of the writings.
Right. But it's still in the writing section.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There, though, I also know that there is something in the Talmud that says that once there was like a lots of midrashim on Chronicles, which like filled.
Yeah. There is
had-
that idea of like, oh, there's this book that like we never read. I don't. There's no haftarot that use Chronicles. I don't think that would be very
Yeah.
boring.
It's so boring.
So like, I mean, the Haftarah is just like, we'll read like a chapter from one of the prophets or writings after we're finished reading a whole section of the Pentateuch. So it's
Yeah.
like, it's just this edition, but whatever. So like, I don't know if Chronicles is ever used for that.
I doubt it. It's fucking
yeah.
boring.
yeah,
mean-
I mean there is. Sorry.
No, I was just thinking it's a pseudo historical document. It's meant to be a Chronicles of the Kings. However much later it was actually compiled, and who knows what sources. But yeah, so it's pseudo historical. Like it's got a historical element, but there's how accurate it is. It's not totally inaccurate, but how accurate it is.
I don't know if this is related to that question. Someone in the comments asked, "Is the Jews for Jesus take different than the Orthodox?" And I have to say,
Jews
the
for Jesus
take is different from
It's
Jews.
Messianic.
are not Jews. They're not Jews.
They're
It's a
Christians, yeah.
Baptist cult that's trying to do additional cultural takeover of
I think a
Judaism.
lot of them have now moved to Messianic Judaism, which is still a Christian movement, but I think it's less culty and less like
Jews for
tied to
Jesus was
baptism.
literally started by a Baptist minister. Like it is a Baptist cult. It has fuck all to do with actual Judaism.
Yeah. So their takes are going to be Christian pretty much on every subject.
But just with a funny hat.
I should
even.
also note that I really like that we have 3 pseudonymous commentaries on Chronicles, yet there are less commentaries on Ezra and Nehemiah than Chronicles, which is
but that
funny.
kind of makes sense
so weird.
because it's problematic. They needed more like weird
Oh.
stuff to add to it.
Yeah,
And,
I mean Targum
Ezra
already
and
does
Nehemiah
that,
is
yeah,
like
yeah.
very late, very very easy to understand. So why
Yeah.
do you need so much commentary on it?
Yeah, there is no Targum on Ezra and Nehemiah because it's parsed written in Yamik. So.
It's
Ezra
already
and Nehemiah,
partial.
like you're right, Isaac, that like the difficulties in Chronicles would definitely call for more commentary if you're trying to retrofit everything. But I
Yes.
think as books, Ezra and Nehemiah are much more interesting.
From a
I
critical
especially found
From an
the part-
ideological perspective too.
Yeah, I especially
Yeah.
found the part where they're like, "Hey, Persians, thanks for helping us, but we're not gonna fuck you," as very, very funny. That was very amusing.
Yeah, the don't fuck anyone who's outside the group thing
Yeah,
is.
no mixed marriages. Yeah.
I can't wait for Ezra and Nehemiah because most
Fine.
of the commentaries
I
will be
never-
by females.
Well, I guess I can never fuck a white man again.
Okay, the final comment on this chapter is 34. Knoppers notes that the mention of Abiathar here is initially puzzling. Is this Abiathar the same Abiathar as the priest who earlier served in David's government? He notes that references to DH to resolve this issue is not altogether successful, since problems of interpretation are not exclusive province of the chronicler's work. For example, 1 Kings 4:4 mentions both Abiathar and Tzadok as priests in Solomon's government, even though Solomon earlier banished Abiathar to Anatoth, as we see in 1 Kings 2:26 and 27 and 35. In Chronicles, Abiathar has no role, and the person who works next to Tzadok is Abimelech or Achimelech, son of Abiathar, as we see in 18:16, 24 verses 3 and 6. Japhet writes that the appearance of Abiathar here as Achitophel's successor is probably intended to compensate for his former omission by allotting him some role in David's court.
How-
Here I thought maybe Benaiah and Aviatar were a couple.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
you would love it.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's face it, it's quite common. But because this does contradict obviously the other records, how consistent are the Masoretic text and the Septuagint?
Consistent
On this chapter?
on this.
Yeah, like how much do their numbers line up?
Do you want to look at Knoppers' textual note?
as long as it's not obscenely long. I'm just looking for a
It
ballpark.
is, I mean, it
estimate.
kind of is like I
I
mean,
don't need a
numbers are all the
total
same,
breakdown.
not only you have some like several manuscripts of the Septuagint, you also have cursive manuscripts. So like you also
Oh,
include
fuck.
that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Got
like,
Okay, so you're more likely to get differences within the Septuagint manuscripts than you are between a specific one and the Masoretic, I guess.
No, there has
Yeah.
been a lot of points where we've talked about the difference between the Masoretic texts being later but in the original language and the Septuagint being earlier but a translation. And I mean, we always talk about when they just
Manuscript-wise.
transliterate a word because they don't know what it is, or it's a name, or they think it might be a name. I don't know. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting to try and figure out where discrepancies crept in. Was it from the beginning? Was it a mistake? Are they trying to fix another fix of another fix of a mistake? What's the deal?
Right. Yeah, like is there a Septuagint that says in read about it in Mispar Chronicles or something like that? You know?
yeah, I mean,
Because of like
Not
the
to
weird
my
word.
knowledge.
no, I mean the Toggle does that, I guess. And the number,
Oh really?
yeah, I noted that.
We have had several instances where it's been like, and for all the other things, read the Chronicles or the Annals of the King of Judah.
Yeah,
or
it was just
Israel,
that
blah, blah,
in
blah.
So
this
the
one it was like,
it
yeah.
They
reads
do
so
quote sources.
so the number was not entered as a number in the Chronicles of King David.
Yeah, that sounds
Oh,
like
see,
a
I see.
harmonizing.
Right, that makes sense. That's how
Yeah.
he translated the weird words there. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, just check the Peshitta real quick.
There is one name that looks a bit like a word, which is Achochi.
Yeah.
Which it sounds a bit like my brother, but I think everyone understood it as a name rather than as a noun or whatever.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't see any variation on the name.
Yeah.
No. Okay, yeah, no Christians here. I think there will be on 28.
God damn it. I told you to spray for Christians, Tomer.
Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry?
Mistress.
Continue.
You should say yes, chef.
Yes, chef. Oh yeah.
Can't even complain about it today.
Okay, somebody please read.
I think Aaron,
Lawrence.
that's you.
No, I think Orange should be the last one, right?
Wasn't that the last comment?
No,
Or-
no, the last chapter of the book, right?
Oh, the last chapter. Sure. Okay. Sure. Okay. I guess I'll do 28 then.
Yeah.
Wait, the last chapter is 29.
Yes.
Right, yeah. So I'll do 28, and then Aaron will do 29.
Okay, got it.
All right. David assembled at Jerusalem all the officials of Israel, the officials of the tribes, the officers of the divisions that serve the king, the commanders of the thousands, the commanders of the hundreds, the stewards of all the property and cattle of the king, and his sons, together with the palace officials, the mighty warriors, and all the warriors. Then King David rose to his feet and said, "Hear me, my brothers and my people. I had planned to build a house of rest for the ark of the covenant of the Lord, for the footstool of our God, and I made preparations for building. But God said to me, 'You shall not build a house for my name, for you are a warrior and have shed blood. Yet the Lord God of Israel chose me from all my ancestral house to be king over Israel forever. For he chose Judah as leader. And in the house of Judah, my father's house, and among my father's sons, he took delight in making me king over all Israel. And of all my sons, for the Lord has given me many, he has chosen my son Solomon to sit upon the throne of the kingdom of the Lord over Israel. He said to me, "It is your son Solomon who shall build my house and my courts, for I have chosen him to be a son to me, and I will be a father to him." Who's your daddy? "I will establish his kingdom forever, if he continues resolute in keeping my commandments and my ordinances, as he is today. Now,
Reminds
therefore,
me
in
of
the
when Peter
sight of
Sellers adopted Ringo Starr in that movie. In that movie, The Magic Christian. And if you've never seen The Magic Christian, have an edible and go watch that.
You're so
Yes,
old.
I want to see that actually. I've never seen that, but I mean,
You've never seen it?
Not that one. I've
Yeah.
seen many a funny, obviously.
Yeah,
and blasphemous.
definitely imbibe before you watch that.
Now,
sure.
Now, therefore, in the sight of all Israel, the assembly of the Lord, and in the hearing of our God, observe and search out all the commandments of the Lord your God, that you may possess this good land and leave it for an inheritance to your children after you forever. And you, my son Solomon, know the God of your father, and serve him with single mind and willing heart.
No also means to fuck.
Yes, it does.
Yes, we know.
For the Lord searches every mind and understands every plan and thought. If you seek him, he will be found by you. But if you forsake him, he will abandon you forever. Take heed now, for the Lord has chosen you to build a house as the sanctuary. Be strong and act. Then David gave his son Solomon the plan of the vestibule and of its houses, its treasuries, its upper rooms, and its inner chambers, and of the room for the cover, and the plan of all that he had in mind for the courts of the house of the Lord, all the surrounding chambers, the treasuries of the house of God, and the treasuries for dedicated gifts, for the divisions of the priests and of the Levites, and all the work of the service in the house of the Lord, for all the vessels for the service in the house of the Lord, the weight of gold for all golden vessels for each service, the weight of silver vessels for each service, the weight of the golden lampstands and their lamps, the weight of gold for each lampstand and its lamps, the weight of silver for a lampstand and its lamps, according to the use of each in the service, the weight of gold for each table for the rows of bread, the silver for the silver tables, and pure gold for the forks, the basins, and the cups, for the golden bowls, and the weight of each, for the silver bowls, and the weight of each, for the altar of incense made of refined gold, and its weight. Also,
but wait, there's more.
Wait, there's more. Also is hold on, did I miss a thing? Yeah, also is planned for the golden chariot of the cherubim that spread their wings and covered the ark of the covenant of the Lord. All this in writing at the Lord's discretion he made clear to me, the plan of all the works.
Can be yours for just 12 easy payments of $19.95. Sorry.
Yeah. David said further to his son Solomon, "Be strong and of good courage and act. Do not be afraid or dismayed, for the Lord God, my God, is with you. He will not fail you or forsake you until all the work for the service of the house of the Lord is finished. Here are the divisions of the priests and Levites for all the service of the house of God. And with you in all the work will be every volunteer who has skill for any kind of service. Also, the officers and all the people will be holy at your command." Now, again, we've seen this before.
Wholly at your command, meaning entirely at your command, or
entirely,
they wholly,
Wholly, like
wholly because you command them.
Entirely,
all of them,
with a
all of them.
W, completely.
I also got confused there.
So we've seen this thing before in Chronicles where they try to say that, well, David was the guy who was, he planned everything for the house. He was the chosen one who was going to do it. But then God said, no, Solomon has to do it. So they're giving more credence to David in some way, in an ancestral way. But when it comes to whose seed will sit on the throne of Israel. Again, we see in verse 9, I think. Verse 8. Yeah. You possess this good land and leave it for an inheritance to your children after you forever. So that takes up the same kind of promise that David got in 2 Samuel 7 and is now basically giving it to Solomon. And that's something we've already seen in First Chronicles.
Yeah.
I
It
think,
should be. Sorry.
I was gonna
Sorry.
say, like, verse 18 is pretty interesting
18. Yeah, it is interesting.
because you can read it as like talking about something different, like, plans for the chariots.
Yeah,
And then
that's
the
cool
cherubim,
stuff.
but then it's like, but this sort of like traditional understanding is like the figure of the chariot, or like a representation of the chariot, which is the cherubim, and the chariot in question is the Merkava, the vision that Ezekiel sees, right? The chariot of God.
I find it interesting that they're crediting David for choosing the weights of everything when there's already in the Pentateuch in I think is it the beginning of Numbers, or is it? But where they talk very explicitly about the gold and the precious metals that'll be used for various things in the tabernacle. And I mean, it's not obviously a one-for-one comparison with the things in the temple, but it seems like there's different narratives being pushed here. These are the ancient traditions passed down to us from God that we had to do this, and then David apparently made up all the weights for it, like later.
There's hints that there seems, especially in this chapter, we have like multiple candelabras, and they're like, so the candelabra from the tabernacle was not used, or like, so it seems to be like there was like maybe like 10 like copies of the candelabra and the table, and maybe not the copper altar, but yeah. And then but it also mentions like silver candelabras, which aren't I don't think they're mentioned anywhere else. I don't think there's any silver vessels mentioned.
I know, but they're allotting him that he gave out such and such a weight of silver to the temple, and I mean, apparently they have to use it up. But it's just wildly inconsistent to say, God gave us these specifications for our worship devices, and also David was the one who gave them. It's very inconsistent and very excusey for why we need so much fucking bling. Yeah. The poor can work for themselves while I drink the blood of Christ out of a golden chalice. Vibes.
It's more about, I think this is all about just trying to give David more.
It's definitely like, kissing David's ass.
Yeah, it's just be like, Solomon, everyone knows that David didn't build the temple. Solomon built the temple, and here it's trying to be like, yeah, but David prepared all of the stuff that Solomon would need. So,
so it's like half to his credit.
Temple, it's just
made by his son
to build it.
It's
like an excuse.
Very much.
Yeah, I mean, Knoppers notes that most scholars agree that much of the material in this chapter stems from the chronicler's own hand, and he writes that although commentators agree that a substantial portion of this chapter originates with the chronicler, some consider parts of the work to be later additions. One group of scholars think that a good deal of the material dealing with the plan for the temple, verses 11 through 19, is a later interpolation, for example, Rudolph and Dirksen, while a second group thinks of scattered additions throughout the text. Brown considers verses 1, 4, 5, 8, and 13 through 18 as later interpolations, while Frontveit speaks of the additions as consisting of verses 1, 4 through 6a, 8, 12b, 14 through 18, and 20a. A third group of scholars, most notably Williamson and Japhet, defends the unity of this chapter.
Yeah.
Got another comment. Matt White says, I heard that right. God promises to leave/betray us when we have done everything he asks us to do.
Yeah, at the end there, it got kind of weird. So in verse 20, he will not fail you or forsake you until all the work for the service of the house of the Lord is finished.
And he's definitely going to fail you and forsake you.
I mean, that's pretty much been the entire history of this text as it's represented, has been God betraying and abandoning his people and blaming them for it because Darvo. But yeah,
me do.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's Darvo. God, just it's the narcissist bingo all over again. But I mean, all of these things also being written after the fact, it brings about this interesting dichotomy where you've got particularly people who are concerned about bringing in a specific king or ruler or leader. They're focusing on the Davidic. They have to be a descendant of David to have God's blessing because blah 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 cult. But they really are pushing this story of the chosenness of David. But then if the myths are giving Solomon the credit for the temple, they have to like justify him somehow. So they have to set it up. But also, obviously, David's descendants failed and Israel was taken over and eventually scattered. So how is it that God loves David so much and made this eternal promise to him, but also his descendants dropped the ball? So it has to be the people's fault and some of the descendants' fault. So the blessing on David has to be big enough to overcome all of his descendants' fuck ups, but in a jam tomorrow kind of someday the David will come, King Arthur will return, yada, 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 bullshit. So it's this interesting dichotomy of trying to blame the people and blame the monarchy, but not transfer any of that blame to David. And yeah, it's very weird.
There is some. Just wanted to check real quick about the section, but I did find something very interesting in the Septuagint, which adds a lot of stuff after verse 20. It reads, it adds many words similar to verses 11 through 20a. Specifically, let me just check. No, that's not here. That's the. Oh yeah, that's the pattern of the temple and its house and its treasury and the upper chambers and the inner storerooms and the place of propitiation and the plan of the house of the Lord. And Klein writes that this might have dropped out by homo auteliuton, according to Curtis and Madsen, but it is more likely a correction meant to harmonize the completion of the building project with the details of verse 11. Yeah. Okay, so I'll start with verse 1. Klein comments, quote, many commentators have noted how this verse picks up the basic content of 23:2 after the lengthy excursus-like lists that we have been discussing in chapters 23 through 27. But the makeup of the two assemblies differs. The priests and Levites are notably not among those convened in this verse. And even the verbs used to describe David's convening of the assembly are different. Asaph in 23:2 and Kahal here. Williamson identifies this verse as a Wiederaufnahme, i.e. repetitive resumption of the narrative, a literary device that allows the inclusion of material relevant to the author's main purpose, but that does not precisely fit in his narrative sequence. Japhet proposes that David gathered two main groups in this verse, all the leaders of Israel and all the men of substance. The rest of the groups are to be considered as a subset of the leaders of Israel. The description of the makeup of the assembly is the most detailed in all of Chronicles. On verse 2, and David rose to his feet. Although Kimchi wrote that David rose up from the bed upon which he was lying in his ailment, as we see in 1 Kings 1 through 4, other commentators, including Sudokara, suggest that the picture depicted here of David is different from that of 1 Kings, presenting him as a king who assumes a proper stance for a public presentation. Japhet notes that the expression rose to his feet is used in the Bible to describe the dead being raised to life, as we see in 2 Kings 13:21 and Ezekiel 37:10. And to stand on one's feet is the opposite of to fall prostrate, as we see in Ezekiel 2:1 and 2, as opposed to 1:28, 3:23, and 24. She suggested that the chronicler might depict David's character based on Moses, whose, quote, eye was not dim nor his natural force abated, end quote, in Deuteronomy 30:7. Septuagint reads, David stood in the midst of the assembly, and Josephus in Antiquity 7:370, standing upon a very high rostrum, and Peshitta omits this phrase.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know where they got that or if they were just hyping him up. I mean,
What?
the picture of the ailing king being pulled up, pulling himself together for one last speech to make sure that everything is set right before he dies is something that's used in a lot of fiction and a lot of, you know, pseudo histories of royalty. I mean,
Isn't
noble
there
vision.
is there something about David in like in Kings or whatever that says like he was brought to the pillar or something?
David?
No, that
No.
sounds like hair.
That's Solomon.
No,
Not Solomon,
Solomon?
Hercules.
There's a beautiful scene
Yeah,
in
because
the
David
Vikings where
Because the temple's already built, right? Yeah.
and David is
Okay.
already like ill. Right?
the hero of the whole series, I guess his name, I think his name was Bjorn, I can't remember, but he's dying. He knows he's got nothing left. All he's doing is he's going out on his horse to face the enemy, and he's just trying to sit upright without falling off the saddle.
And
But
they
the legend of who he is, seeing him sitting upright on the horse is already enough to unnerve the enemy.
And then he raises a sword.
And they kill him right there. But it was enough that it helped get the win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bjorn was the first son of Ragnar Lothbrok and Lagatha. And he's a legend. And that's a death worthy of Valhalla. So
Okay. On that same verse, a house as a place of rest for the ark of the covenant of the Lord. This phrase is unique to the Hebrew Bible, though appearing frequently in the Targums, as we see in Targum Onkelos and Neophiti on Deuteronomy 12:9, Targum Jonathan on Judges 20:43, Micah 2:10, and Isaiah 28:12, which, according to Klein, reflects the linguistic usage in the post-exilic period. Knoppers writes that the temple is presented as a permanent repository for the roving Ark of the Covenant. In this respect, the chronicler's ideology has been influenced both by DH in 1 Kings 8, 1-13, and Psalms 1-2. He notes that other texts, like 2 Samuel 7, 4-7, question whether such a stationary sanctuary was legitimate, much less necessary. Later, Isaiah 66:1 has Yahweh question whether anyone could build him a house or a place of rest, in Hebrew, makom menuchati. And he further writes, quote, Psalms 1-2 assumes the need for David to find Yahweh an appropriate sanctuary, as we see in Psalms 1-2, 2-5. David avoids his house and abstains from sleep until he finds a domicile for the mighty one of Jacob. The psalmist celebrates the ark's ascent to Yahweh's resting place, in Hebrew menuchatecha, identified as Zion, in Hebrew menuchati. The chronicler participates in this older temple theology. His work is especially influenced by Psalms 1-2, even if his own perspective differs from it on some details. That the chronicler's discussion reflects a polemic against the notion of Psalms 1-2 that David found a place of rest for Yahweh is doubtful because the chronicler quotes the psalm at the dedication of the temple in 2 Chronicles 6:41.
Oh, so to summarize the chapter, Solomon had 2 daddies and God needs a nap.
I guess.
Come on, Tomer.
What?
We've talked about letting your sense of humor relax a little.
Sorry. Okay. On verse 4, commentators note that God's choice of David as king forever is already attested in DH, as was in 1 Samuel 16, 8-12, 2 Samuel 6:21, 1 Kings 8:16, and 11:34, as well as in the parallel passages in Chronicles, 2 Chronicles 6:6, just as Yahweh had chosen Saul before him in 1 Samuel 10:24. Dirksen writes that, though not wanting to deny in retrospect the legitimacy of Saul's kingship, the chronicler probably does want to emphasize how David's kingship was implied in God's plan, and thus according maximum legitimacy. Klein notes that Judah's election is attested in relationship to David's and Mount Zion's in Psalms 78, 68, and 70, and is implied in Genesis 48, 8-12. The word Nagid, leader, usually refers to a person designated for kingship before popular acclamation, as we see in 1 Samuel 9:16 and 10:1, although in Chronicles it has a more generic sense.
Someone was really offended when they heard the Bible described as one of the most effective pieces of propaganda that ever existed. because I think they thought it was anti-Semitic, which was an interesting take. But I look at this and I'm like, I look at David, look at what's recorded of him, even by his fans. And they've taken this petty warlord who betrays his friends and murders them and steals their wives, and a usurper from his own king who warred against his own people, and try and turn him into this, idealized paragon of a king whose blessing and closeness with God goes down through all generations and will always circle back to someday. It's unbelievable. Kind of makes you, it makes, I don't say it makes me understand why evangelicals worship Trump as God, but it seems a similar process. Rewriting things.
There is this idea of like trying to establish the historicity of Jesus, for example, where you kind of use this like idea of embarrassment or something, criteria.
Oh yeah, why would they write this if they were so embarrassing?
I never really liked that argument.
It's incredibly stupid.
Maybe I'm being wrong. I'm thinking of, that's maybe a Christian argument. I'm thinking of just like basic historicity, where it's like, very basic things like Jesus not fulfilling, being killed and not fulfilling the prophecy of the Messiah.
Wouldn't they have tried to sell a better story if they were just making it up?
Yeah, exactly.
That entire argument is based on the obviously false premise that if a story is fictional, it was invented all at once by one person with a coherent goal and who put it together. That's not how shit works, especially when you have in-groups and stories passing around and the need to defend any story that you think is part of the authentic in-group and harmonize shit. Like, that's how you end up with this mess. It's a very simple process. It's easily observed in every fucking church you go to. Like, I don't understand what's so hard.
It lends credence to the idea of like, there probably is some guy who Jesus is based on that was killed by the Romans.
Well, the problem isn't that there was one. The problem is that there were so many. And you get 16 stories traveling around. They didn't have Snopes. You get stories about 6 different guys traveling around that sound like they could vaguely be the same guy, and before you know it.
Right. So I was just wondering if you could use a similar like system with David, right? The way that you're talking about David is like, they retrofitted an existing story.
Yeah.
We don't have any physical evidence of David,
of a real David. Yeah.
But does this, because of the way this is written, does it kind of make sense that there is a real figure that it's based on, who, as you said, was a usurper, took over from a king before him, and had to establish
the fact that they keep trying to not totally dismiss Saul and still have David be his son-in-law via Michael, but she has no legitimate descendants that are in the. So they managed to cut off Saul's bloodline even through his daughter with David from taking the throne, so that nobody should be able to trace back a claim to him. And also, but they're still trying to legitimize him somewhat. That means that they were contending with a narrative that they didn't feel they could uproot about Saul. Whether or not that was based in something real, I don't know. Doubtless somewhere down the line, something real had something to do with something, but the degree of accuracy, at this point, it's just that the story is so enmeshed.
There's a point. Sorry, go ahead, Isaac.
No, I was just going to say, like, it could be like David himself was a real figure and they had to retrofit him, or it could be later on the descendants, the kings of Judah, were known as.
Wasn't Robin Hood a little bit inspired by a real character, but kind of not, like highly fictionalized? Yeah, Robin Hood. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a real person called Robin of Lockleigh, something like that, and but I don't think he lived at the right time, or I think there was a sheriff of Nottingham, but if he was alive during the Crusades, then it wouldn't have made sense about this part of the story. I don't remember. I remember reading about it a while ago, but exactly. There is a real person with that name. Arthur is more legend, mythological.
Far more legend
more legendary than Robin Hood. Yeah.
I did want to point something out about the criterion of embarrassment.
Loxley,
So a few months ago, I dropped a comment in the Discord, which everyone should join, and Peter is definitely sharing the link right now. I said, am I the only one that thinks the criterion of embarrassment is kind of ridiculous? Like MAGA exists. They make it up all the time, and even though they should be embarrassed, they're not.
I didn't mean the Christian criterion of embarrassment. I was referring to the.
I know, but
sort of
Lawrence has a
Bar
good
Ehrman-
point, and we can use that in the
The
future.
thing
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
so-
I was
and I thought I
more
was
referring
cooking.
to the Bar Ehrman argument for the historicity.
For the historicity of Christ.
Yeah,
I'm like,
Then,
yeah.
I just
I was wondering if you could
clear.
extend it to David.
And then Simone pointed out that the idea is that the criterion is used internal to the values of the community being described. According to, so yeah. So if it wouldn't be embarrassing within their own group. Yeah.
But listen
Lawrence, I
to
put a link
the-
to Tomer's
listen to-
Discord server in chat.
I don't
as you
know whose
asked.
Discord that is.
Listen to the explanations that people in various religious Christian communities specifically will give to try and paste over inconsistencies and contradictions in the Bible. They will pull anything out of their ass, and as long as it makes the people feel like it isn't really a contradiction, it's just a little more complex than some people can understand, as long as they get that vibe, they will accept it. Does not fucking matter. Also,
anyways,
maggots
I
have no
think,
shame.
Should I? I think I'll read the comments here.
No, there he is. No.
there he
You
is.
can't. You can't. You're not allowed to.
Arn, were you gonna read some of these comments?
There's only one.
You're
You're
muted.
muted, Aaron.
Sorry about that. One moment. Okay.
I guess
Alright.
yeah, just the one.
Okay, Brevin Redinger says, Mr. Ra, I found your channel through Dave Farina and have enjoyed your easy to digest videos. Not to mention curb stomping the trog Kent Hovind in your debate. Thank you, sir. Cheers. That's very pleasant. Thank you very much.
Mm. Okay, where was I? I was on verse 5.
Probably
Uh,
an
Yeah? What did you say?
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, on verse 5. He has chosen my son Solomon. Knoppers calls this, quote, a fascinating assertion to make in the context of the late Persian and early Hellenistic age, end quote. Aside from David, a few individual figures are divinely elected in the Bible. Abraham in Nehemiah 9:7, Aaron in Psalms 105:26, and Zerubbabel in Haggai 2:23. But Chronicles is the only book that explicitly speaks of Solomon's election. He writes Solomon's admission to the August office is set against this background of a pattern of divine intervention in Israelite history. David's speech to the National Assembly provides, in fact, the most detailed public declaration of Solomon's accession, tasks, and goals. On verses 6 and 7, Johnstone comments, quote, the validity of Solomon's status is confirmed yet further by the fact that this election is sealed by a covenant of adoption expressed in the most intimate terms possible. Solomon becomes father. Because this kingship is, in principle, divine decreed and sustained and is transparent to rule of God himself, it is everlasting. Yet there is an element of contingency. The maintenance of the covenant depends upon the continued faithfulness of the Davidic house. On verse 8, Dirksen comments, quote, verse 8 is difficult to place. The mention of all Israel as a witness must relate to David's call, but in that case, something must have dropped out. It is also striking that the addressee and witness, i.e. Israel, are identical. Rudolph inserts, hear my word, and attributes shimru through ve'ata in verse 9 to a later hand. The fact that Israel is a witness would tie in well with Solomon as addressee. The verse does not fit in with the context, particularly with the chronicler's view that Solomon's succession ushers in the final period of rest, culminating in the building of the temple. Sure enough, darash is a favorite term in Chronicles, but in by far the most cases it is a seeking of God, and only here a seeking of his commandments. Though it is difficult to indicate for what purpose these words were added, it still seems most likely that verse 8 is a later addition.
And also, Seeking is a good Pokemon.
How do you have a bachelor's in whatever the fuck you do?
How do I have
Is
2
it-
bachelors?
Are you
Yeah.
telling me you don't think the nerds end up in college? Sir.
I am in university, you know.
Yeah.
Or whatever
Remember
the
this-
fuck you do.
Yeah.
Remember the summer of Pokemon Go?
Yeah, that was fun. Never
I was
stopped
kayak-
for me. I'm still here
was kayak-
coping.
I was kayaking down the canal, and there were people on the bridge with their phones out, and I'm like, "Look, they're filming us," and they weren't. They were just getting a fucking Sea King.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Seeking
Okay.
is such a good Pokemon. It has a very dynamic move set. It learns Poison Jab, Icy Wind, Drill Run. It can do a lot of stuff, all right?
Evolution, eh?
Yeah. Moving on. Verse 9. If you seek him, he will be found by you, but if you forsake him, he will reject you forever. Klein comments, quote, the chronicler has David articulate clearly the positive and negative consequences of the doctrine of retribution. This is the second use of darash, seek, in this verse, and this time with Solomon as subject and Yahweh as object. Here it is used in the chronicler's characteristic sense of religious fidelity. Close parallels to this statement of retribution appear in Deuteronomy 4:29, Jeremiah 29:13, and Isaiah 55:6. The first 2 passages emphasize that God can be found only by those who seek him with their whole heart and spirit. The prophet Azariah proclaims to Asa 2 similar if-then statements in 2 Chronicles 15:2. If you seek him, he will be found by you. And 4, when the people turned to Yahweh and sought him, he was found by them. The chronicler seems to be arguing against the position of the DH, who wrote in 1 Kings 11:4, his, i.e. Solomon's heart was not true to Yahweh his God, as was the heart of his father David. Such sins of Solomon would have led to his being cast off by Yahweh. Since he was not cast off, he must have sought Yahweh. To abandon or forsake, in Hebrew azav Yahweh, is a major concern in Chronicles.
I love that. They tell the stories of how he forsook God, but he was still blessed. So he must not have actually forsaken God, or maybe he went back and they made up. I don't know. But what we expected to happen didn't happen, which doesn't mean we're wrong. It just means I have to make up more shit.
I mean, there is a story where like Solomon gets kidnapped and replaced by a demon.
Wait. Was he kidnapped and replaced by a demon or by a robot clone?
I mean, would there really have been a
I
difference
think it
in
was
that
get it.
day and
Asmodeus.
age?
I think it was like Ashmedai, like the king of demons.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be
Sometimes-
Asmodeus,
Because I'm just
right?
lamenting that the
Asmodeus.
president of my country actually tweeted
Yeah.
that Joe Biden died and was secretly replaced by a sleepy robot clone with dementia.
As if, okay. Yeah. Okay.
And I'm just,
It's
how do you be a
robots.
robot and a clone?
These
Tesla
are
robot, where it-
people who read an article about how 5G forces, like 5 times gravity that you get from being thrown around in a rocket, could kill you, to thinking that their internet was giving them COVID. Okay. There is no.
5G.
I
Look.
bought my mother a 5G phone,
Oh,
and
for
she
fuck's
argued.
sake.
She was resisting, and I'm there with the salesman trying to explain 5G to my
Not
mom.
that G. It's not. It's a different G.
It's
It's gravity, not gigabytes.
it's not telepathic, Mom.
So yeah, okay. Look, that I was telling you guys about the TikTok of the Elbows Up Canada girl this morning, and how she was talking about Kinder eggs, and how apparently Americans are too stupid not to swallow a plastic pellet filled with a toy if it's inside chocolate. And she did a skit on that. So it's illegal. They won't ban anything that actually hurts them, but they'll ban Kinder eggs. in America, which is the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard of.
Well, we gotta ban Tide Pods, don't we?
Yeah, well, if there's one thing I have learned, especially living next door to the United States for my entire life, it is that the limit does not exist for American stupidity. Not for all individuals, but for the collective of the stupids, the limit does not exist. They will go lower. I don't know how. It's a black hole at this point, but they can always go dumber.
That is all true.
My
Yeah.
conspiracy theory is that it's YouTube is making money out of it, so they're encouraging it. There's so much content you can make about American stupidity, so they just encourage it more and more.
Hey, no, American stupidity. Rick Mercer from 22 Minutes at the time did a series called Talking to Americans that was entirely improvisationally based. Initially, it was just some rambly guy came up and talked to him, and he decided to film it. And the stupid shit that came out of this man's mouth. And this was before YouTube existed, honey. Okay. We had a full hour special by the time that series stopped of just the dumbest shit imaginable, which included, was it the governor of Arkansas? It was one of the governors congratulating Canada for working to preserve our national igloo. He did this in his government office. And because I read what Rick Mercer, the fellow who did this show, wrote about it, that before the cameras went on, the governor pulled him aside and said, I just have to ask you one question straight, Rick. And he's like, absolutely. Shit, I'm going to get caught. And he goes, is this a controversial issue in Canada? And Rick says, nope. No, we were pretty much all on the same side with this one. It is on the YouTubes, but it predates the entire website.
Well, I'm not blaming YouTube fully for the epidemic. I'm just like saying that they're encouraging it because it makes them money.
I mean,
like TikTok.
The really weird what's. Okay, does anyone know if the birds aren't real and they are spy planes that charge on? Does anyone know if that's just satire or if someone actually believes that?
I mean, half
a
the
rule of
conspiracy
thumb,
theories
at
they
least
started as satire.
A rule of thumb: at least one person genuinely believes it.
You're right. I should listen to my own lesson. The limit does not exist.
There's a website on that. There's a whole lot of people who believe that, not just one person.
I'm just wondering if it's like bots that
and they have they used to have their own website. I'm not sure if it's still up, but they used to.
Okay, moving on. On verse 11, of the rooms described here, 2 are particularly interesting. The storerooms, in Hebrew, Gan Zakav, and the place of atonement, in Hebrew, Beit HaKaporet. The word Ganzakav is a hapax, probably derived from Ganzach, a loanword from Persian, referring to treasuries, as was in Vulgate, Traditionals, Klein, and Halot.
So this is the treasury of their ganja?
Oh my god. Do I even need to? I don't know. Though Septuagint.
Yeah, I was gonna say I would have thought someone might have translated it like the first part of the word gan in Hebrew means garden. I wonder if are there any like interpretations of it being like a corruption of a Hebrew word, like gardens and.
We've already had a burning bush. I see no reason they can't have ganja.
I don't think
it was the burning bush that started all this.
Frankincense.
No, I don't see
anything.
Okay.
I sat by a burning bush and suddenly I started seeing and thinking all kinds of crazy shit, man.
So
my burning bush.
Please. The Septuagint has Zako, which of course because it's the original, it's very like
yeah. I mean it's a good excuse, that one at least, because it's like, as you said, it's a hapax, so it's translating it might have been difficult, so they just went with transliterating it.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's the name. It is a proper name in a sense. It's a proper name of a place. So like just transliterating it is fine,
I guess. The word kaporet, generally translated to mercy or atonement, describes the covering of the ark in priestly writings, as we see in Exodus 25, 17 through 22, 26, 34, 36, etc. But Beit HaKaporet is unique to the Hebrew Bible and is common in rabbinic literature, and is used here to describe the most inner part of the temple, the Holy of Holies, as we see in Exodus 26, 33, or Debil in 1 Kings 6, 19 and 20. Japhet writes that in the current context, the term Beit HaKaporet serves a double purpose. To equate the Solomonic temple with the desert tabernacle, and to emphasize the role of the temple as a resting place for the ark. An emphasis repeated with the special reference to the cherubim in verse 18.
So, yeah, I mean, it's translated here as the kaparet is the cover of the ark.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But there is a connection to repentance, right?
Is this a different cover than the linen sheets that are supposed to go over it? And there's like so many of them.
I think it's talking about the lid, right?
Okay. Fair enough. Well, no, because they had that whole thing where you had to layer specific colors of things.
Or is kaparet the word for the actual curtain in front of it?
Yeah, kaporet is used for the like cover in Exodus, right? But here it seems it could read it as mercy seat, right? I guess.
So it's the lid, the bit where the cherubs are attached to.
Yeah, I mean, Klein writes that it seems to describe the content of the room in the Chronicles day, since the ark itself was not part of the second temple.
Right. The curtain in front of the Holy of Holies has got a different name. It's called the
Kodesh. No.
It's the same name they use for the ark in a synagogue. The curtain in front of that parochet.
Yeah. Which yeah. I mean, it's a
similar.
It's a change of amalgamation, anagram. Sorry, and it's an anagram of that. Right?
Oh yeah, parochet. Yeah.
Okay. On verse 12, the plans. Knoppers comments, quote, "The author was probably thinking of a written description rather than of a blueprint or a drawing. Compare Ezekiel 8:3 and 10:8. If a drawing was meant, it would be hard to imagine how such a sketch would apply to the precise materials and mixture of materials from which certain objects were to be made. For example, gold, pure gold, and refined gold. It is also difficult to imagine how a drawing or a model would apply to the divisions of the priests and the Levites in 1 Chronicles 28:13. But an explanation in written form could address issues such as objects, weight, materials, mixtures of materials, location, and dimensions. Compare Exodus 25:8-40 and Josephus in Antiquity 7:375. Given this understanding of tavnit, there is no compelling need to construe tavnit in verse 18 as designating something different from the tavnit in earlier verses."
Wouldn't that be cool if they found like a Geniza or like the Dead Sea Scrolls, like an actual like blueprint, plan of the temple?
That would be cool. I don't think that they were much for.
We do have a treasure map, right?
Oh, yeah. The pirate duck has it.
Yeah. I mean, modern, like...
I'm gonna go grab my cutlass and we'll see if you want to keep saying that shit.
Yeah,
like modern
But do you have the mask for the man in black?
No. But I can make up for it. Got a machete, too.
Lawrence, do you actually have a cutlass?
Yeah.
Get it.
I didn't know you drove an Oldsmobile,
is that allowed on
Lawrence?
YouTube?
It is a prop cutlass, YouTube. Prop.
Yeah, prop cutlass. Prop. Fake one.
Absolutely no cutlassing has in fact been done in any real sense to anything more threatening than a styrofoam prop. Because, we must stand our ground against the styrofoam props.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, yes.
Let me see.
Let's see your swords, boys.
How did you know I had one?
Well, what's
Wow.
funny is actually, hold on. I'm pretty sure, Aaron, haven't you seen these? You've seen my collection, right? Well, my handle isn't as fancy.
I've been in that room, so I would think so.
Yeah,
So-
you've seen the collection.
Lawrence, you're telling me if I marry you to get you into Canada, you will bring books and swords?
Yes.
Yeah, you might like this one, Lawrence. If you
That
have
is
it.
that is a good sword. I like
Might
that.
be difficult to import swords into Canada.
Is it time for show and tell? Because I have guitars.
I will start a theater company that
Oh, mine is
requires
not
them.
sharp. Mine is a prop. Mine is a prop. Not sharp
Yes.
at all.
Well,
Yeah,
you know,
this
some
one-
of them are ornamental.
Right, yeah.
This
I
one
like
is not the best steel of sword I've ever had, but it is sharp, and it does hold an edge, and it's got a nice curve to it. I think, Lawrence, you would love this.
Curves.
saying I like the curve, sure.
The science backs up the curved blades.
Katana is a Japanese sword. Okay, so on verses 14 through 18, Dirksen comments, quote, the syntactic structure of this passage is unclear. Rudolph's emendations, by which the syntactic irregularities are removed and a parallelism is created between gold and silver, are plausible, albeit hypothetical. The following features of the enumeration catch the eye. In the tabernacle, there was one golden lampstand in Exodus 25, 31 through 35. In Solomon's temple, there were twice 5, also made of gold, in 1 Kings 7:49, aka 2 Chronicles 4, 7 and 20. The chronicler mentions only one golden lampstand in 2 Chronicles 13:11. The mention of silver as well as golden lampstands is a striking example of the author's tendency to create a stylistic balance. The same applies to the tables for the showbread. Only here do silver tablets occur. 2 Chronicles 4:8 talks about 10 tables. According to Exodus 25:23 forward, the tabernacle contained one wooden table overlaid with gold. 1 Kings 7:48 and following on, 2 Chronicles 13:11 and 29:18 talk about one table in the temple.
I think there is a mention of silver tables in the temple outside, used for sacrificing for the meat.
It would make sense to have the big sacred uber golden whatever the fuck, and then more of a perhaps precious but not quite as precious material for some of the practical shit. You're still showing off, but
I mean the way the verse is written, it kind of implies it's talking about the showbread table and then silver showbread tables. So it's like, which aren't mentioned anywhere else. So it seems to be implying that
does only the high priest get to eat from the golden showbread table and the others have to make do with the silver showbread table? Or
which one's less toxic?
I don't think either. Well, provided there, because the refinement process, the refinement process was not perhaps what it would be today. So as long as they're not mingled with lead or
actually, there are no silver there are not silver tables in the Bible. There is in 2 Kings 12:13 and 2 Kings 25:15 silver articles in the Jerusalem temple, but not specifically silver tables.
Oh, okay. Maybe it's
angels.
Maybe it's a second temple thing. I definitely remember there being like, maybe they're not called tables. They could have a different name.
I mean, it is a contradiction between the different descriptions, but at the same time, since we know the chronicler was writing later, if you're going to, you can make up as much shit as you want that was there before the evil Babylonians came in and took all our shit. And if anywhere in the stories you have they plundered us, you can make your grievance greater by having had more shit that they supposedly plundered, but also it feeds into the grand good old days, the golden age, the blah 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 myth that a lot of people in different times and places have fed off of.
Yeah, you should also note that the golden bowls are only mentioned in late sources and probably reflect the chronicler's own setting in the late Achaemenid era. Sheshbazzar is said to have brought the golden bowls back from Babylon in the time of Cyrus the Great in Ezra 1:10. That's according to Knoppers. Okay. On 18, the plan for the chariot that is the cherubim of gold. Knoppers writes that the reference to the cherubim as a chariot is both unusual and intriguing when compared to the background of Pentateuchal and Deuteronomistic texts referring to the ark, tabernacle, and temple. He notes that a number of prophetic sources like Isaiah 66:15, Habakkuk 3:8, Zechariah 6:1-8 refer to Yahweh's chariot, usually in the context of a theophany or of a march of the divine warrior. Several texts speak of Yahweh as enthroned upon the cherubim, as we see in 1 Samuel 4:4, 2 Samuel 6:2, 2 Kings 19:15, etc. He suggests that the author might be influenced by his understanding of Ezekiel's vision. He writes, quote, Ezekiel does not explicitly refer to the wheeled object of his vision as a chariot for Yahweh in 1:4-24 and 10:1-22, nor does Ezekiel speak of the ark in this manner. But the book of Ezekiel does refer to the four living creatures who support God's portable throne as cherubim, as we see in Ezekiel 10:3-20 and 11:22. And Ezekiel's wheeled vehicle was understood as a chariot by generations of later interpreters, as witnessed by writings in the Apocrypha like Sirach 49:8, the Qumran literature 4Q286 and 4Q287, Hellenistic synagogue prayers, the pseudepigrapha like 3rd Enoch 37:1 and 2, and Apocalypse of Moses 8:22, 33, and 38, and the highly developed Merkabah mystical writings of the Middle Ages. Ezekiel also associates the cherubim with Yahweh's throne in 10:1-22 and speaks of God's glory as moving from the cherubim, as we see in 8:2, 10:4, 18:20, and 11:22. Similarly, in the priestly code, Yahweh speaks from between the two cherubim in Exodus 25:22 and Numbers 7:89. In short, this may be another instance in which the chronicler fuses images from several sources to create his own distinctive presentation. Indeed, his blend of imagery anticipates the elaborate combination of features seen in later texts.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a lot of thoughts on Ezekiel 1. There was a very good paper from Suzanne Trufant and Christoph Eulinger, or I guess it would be pronounced Eulinger. So it paralleled Ezekiel 1 with a lot of Babylonian and Assyrian imagery, and I go into some of it in my video on biblical cosmology, but one of the things that you see in especially Neo-Assyrian reliefs is essentially the exact kind of creatures that are described in Ezekiel 1, and they're holding up the firmament, they're holding up the sky, and often you see a wheel represented. But it's important to note that in Ezekiel 1, the wheels were not moving. They weren't turning.
Wasn't it wheels within wheels, though? It was some sort of complex. It was almost like
right.
More than just an ordinary
there's a bunch
wheel.
of different hypotheses. On it. Yeah.
The phrasing is special.
Yeah, but I can't wait to get to Ezekiel. I'm gonna have a lot to say on that.
That's gonna be so fun. I haven't read. Have I read 3rd Enoch? I don't think I've read 3rd Enoch.
You know who did read 3rd Enoch? Me on my channel on the Friday Apocryphal podcast. We read all the books of Enoch.
I've only read half the Apocrypha you've read.
3rd Enoch is the one where Enoch actually becomes Metatron. He actually transforms.
So this is like the really good fan fiction with the complex transformation and the badass powers and the we could make a man god of this. Okay. All right. Gotcha.
Okay, on verse 19, Japhet writes that although the general meaning of this verse is clear, the details of its first half are difficult. 1, the verse is read in the first person, which leads some to add "and David said" before the verse, or to change "alai" to "alav" based on Septuagint. David gave all these to Solomon. 2, the Masoretic pronunciation is "from the hand of Yahweh upon me to understand," but some suggest reading "from the hand of Yahweh upon me," or from the hand of Yahweh upon it, in Hebrew alav, referring to the temple. 3, to whom the writing is attributed to, Yahweh or David. And 4, to understand, in Hebrew hiskil, what's the subject and object. She concludes, quote, 1, it seems first that miyad, the original meaning of which was from the hand of, eventually deteriorated into a mere preposition denoting from. Compare 2 Chronicles 36, Psalms 1419, and 1 Kings 1846. I blanked out. Denoting from, compare 2 Chronicles 36, Psalms 1419, and Job 520, etc. 2, the idiom "the hand of the Lord upon X," found in 2 Kings 3:15, 2 Kings 3:15, 1 Kings 18:46, Ezekiel 1:3, etc., is never found with the preposition "from," which indeed is incongruent with it. 3, hiskil should be understood as transitive and the Masoretic punctuation retained. Our reading would then be, all this in writing from God as he had made me/him understand. Thus completing the sentence which began in verse 11, David gave Solomon his son the plan, etc. And finally, 20 and 21, Knoppers comments, quote, the king will deliver other speeches, but this, his final address to Solomon, picks up and extends his earlier admonition in verses 9 and 10. As in the earlier speech, David exhorts his son to be courageous in the face of the challenges that awaits him. Pointing to the continuity of divine leadership, Yahweh my God is with you, despite the imminent discontinuity in human leadership, David assures his son that God will see him through to the completion of his task. In this respect, David's speech alludes to the plans for the temple and its courts in verses 11 through 19, since Solomon's mission is to build this edifice in verse 20. David's address also involves the assembled dignitaries in verse 1. He assures Solomon that he does not face the future alone. These authorities, as well as others, will assist him in his appointed duties in verse 21. By having David mention the officers, the priests, and the Levites, the writer brings closure to this sequence of events and prepares the reader for the public speeches and installation to follow in chapter 29.
Was there not anything else about the figure of the chariot?
What, in verse 18?
Yeah.
I mean, I've already noted Knoppers about this, which might have resemblances to Ezekiel, maybe influenced by it, but
the pseudo wheel style angels holding up the firmament gives the idea that, it's sort of all God's chariot.
Right. It's just that it seems to be the way that it's written seems a bit weird. Like maybe it said something. And because it uses the same word it uses in part of the chapter, like the plans for the images of, like
Tavnit.
Yeah, Tavnit. So I mean, like JPS translates it as for the figure of the chariot, and then the cherubim. M dash, the cherubim, M dash, those with the white outspread wings. But I don't think the Hebrew reads that nicely. It's just like, and for the image of the chariot, the cherubim, gold, for outspreading, and covering, for the ark. So it's like.
I mean, Klein notes Rudolph's opinion that a translation of form rather than plan, as in verses 11 and 12.
Right, because it's talking about gold for the thing, so it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
He's prepared gold for the thing, so you wouldn't say gold for a plan. So it does make sense. It's talking about like the figure of something.
Yeah, he weighed out X amount for candlesticks, X amount for yada, yada, yada. Although, I don't know, the way we're discussing the forms and the covers and the way the Bible describes it with the, the same as the firmament and the holding up, it sort of seems like many of the sacred objects were at one point intended to reflect their view of the universe, and then maybe somewhat lost in translation over time.
Yeah. I was just wondering if, like, there is some, like, that the Holy of Holies had different stuff in it over time, and
Probably,
they had to consolidate it into like this one ark, one box that contained the covenant, and then it had a lid which were the cherubim, which is also the chariot, which is also the footstool of God. You know what I mean? Like,
right. And then you know, what is it? Heaven is my throne, earth is my footstool. Where is the house you can build for me? The idea of, you know, and then the covering goes over it, much like the firmament, the heavens over the, you know, that kind of thing. You
right,
get this
just kind of. So I'm wondering if it's just like something that like there were multiple different things, and they kind of combined it all into this one, you know, device where the lid of it is the covering, but it's also the.
I mean, there's no
God.
doubt the actual objects would have evolved over time. There is the myth of the things in the Ark of the Covenant, you know, the tablets, the remains of Aaron's staff, and some like a jar of manna. Yeah.
Soil?
And so
Abraham
that, you know,
used?
that could have been a reflection of the idea that there were things that were kept in there that were too sacred to be seen. And then you fit it into, you know, if nobody can look, then you can fit it into your narrative in whatever way you want, as long as you work within the confines.
And then the Talmud has to figure out the spatial layout. It's like, how did the tablets and the scroll fit
how
inside?
do they fit? Yeah, well, and it would depend on the size of them, because like you want a big ceremonial scroll, but also
so according to those who hold that they were cubes, then this like the scroll is on the outside, like on a little shelf.
Yeah.
And according to the ones that they were square in one direction, but then like.
But even prior to that, that would have been part of the effort to harmonize and bring together things in an earlier phase of it. I mean, Lawrence talks about how he believes there was a statue of Yahweh on there initially, and obviously later there wasn't. But we also know there was an Asherah. There was the divine masculine and feminine until the Yahweh alonist cult decried Asherah and basically threw God's wife out and burned all her stuff, because they're real mature that way. But yeah, like these are all, we can get glimpses of moments in that transition, but I think it's like anything else. It's like fossils, you know, you get a few here and there, but you don't get the every generation snapshot vibe.
Now I said that there are Christians, and there are two Christians here. The first is John of Damascus, who writes that as political prosperity is the business of emperors, so the condition of the church is the concern of shepherds and teachers.
Okay, well, he's not wrong.
It's just like, that's what this chapter is about. The chapter is about, we should learn that because kings are in charge of the temple or whatever,
it's because
in charge of the church.
Yeah, the job of the secular powers, your kings and emperors at that time, obviously, is to, you know, function for the prosperity of the nation and the people, by extension, at least hypothetically. Then the spiritual well-being, and also there's a little tinge of the blessing theology, you know, the prosperity gospel. God will bless you with good spiritual health and many spiritual children.
What does that even mean? I'm so irritated with that. I mean, we have our president has a spiritual advisor. Wouldn't you have to know something first before you could be an advisor? Wouldn't you?
Aaron, I read a very interesting article today. I promise this is not a tangent. Tomer, it does directly address this.
No,
there was an Australian farmer who could not get workers for his field, and he was going to lose his farm. And then his nephew showed him a video of some alpha male dude bros who paid to go to a camp and be tortured to get their masculinity up. So he sold a camp, sold out. Basically, rich, entitled, insecure men are paying money to come and work on his farm while he screams at them to get their masculinity back. There is no limit to what you can sell insecure, anxious, desperate people. Reality is barely an inconvenience in that narrative.
So he's farming his crop, and at the same time he's
Yeah, they can chop wood, build fences. They'll gain real alpha male skills to be providers for their fantasy world, and he'll yell at them, which will make them more manly.
Maybe that's what they're going to do in America to replace all of the immigrants that they threw out. Like,
It would make a lot of money.
I do like that John adds any other method is piracy.
Ahoy.
Yeah. And also Bede writes that the fact that the entire height of the temple was 120 cubits refers to the same mystery as when the primitive church in Jerusalem, after the passion and resurrection and ascension of the Lord into heaven, received the grace of the Holy Spirit in the same number of men.
it did?
I guess. I didn't read
That opal guy, you take that back. You take that back. You do not associate me with that nasty little fuck.
Yeah, that's it.
That's so random.
Get on.
120,
Aaron, I
120
think it's
cubits.
about time you finish us off.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I think what was that? Who was that? Who said that?
Bede.
Which Christian? Bede. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think Bede was just thinking about 120 men's cubits.
Shut up.
But, yeah.
Well, I mean, what else did the monks have to think about?
All right, are we ready now?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
Get on with it, yes.
No, this needs to
King
be dramatic.
David said to the whole assembly, "My son Solomon, whom alone God has chosen, is young and inexperienced, and the work is great, for the temple will not be for mortals, but for the Lord God, who is spiritual, not material, and exists outside of our universe, so we can't use a temple." But never mind. We'll just not think about that. "So I have provided for the house of my God, so far as I was able, the gold for the for the things of gold, the silver for the things of silver, and the bronze for the things of wood. I'm sorry, the bronze for the things of bronze, the iron for the things of iron, and wood for the things of wood. Besides great quantities of onyx and stones for setting antimony, colored stones, all sorts of precious stones, and marble in abundance, because God needs that.
Yeah, you know that Onyx is a Pokemon, right, Lawrence? Right, Lawrence?
Onyx is a Pokemon. That is true. Evolves into Steelix.
Yeah.
Moreover, in addition to all of that, I have provided for the holy house. I have a treasure of my own of gold and silver, and because of my devotion to the house of my God, I give it to the house of my God, because he is my God. So it's technically all still mine. 3,000 talents of gold, and the gold of Ophir, and 7,000 talents of refined silver for overlaying the walls of the house, and for all the work to be done by artisans. Gold for the things of gold, and silver for the things of silver. And who then will offer willingly, consecrating themselves today to the Lord?"
I have
Then the
given
leaders-
so much, and now we'll pass the plate.
Then the leaders of ancestral houses made their free will offerings, as did also the leaders of the tribes of Israel, the commanders of the thousands and of the hundreds, and of the officers over the king's work. They gave for the service of the house of God 5,000 talents and 10,000 derricks of gold, 10,000 talents of silver, 18,000 talents of bronze, and 100,000 talents of iron, and not one bit of Bitcoin. Whoever had precious stones gave them to the treasury of the house of the Lord into the care of Jehiel the Gershonite. Then the people rejoiced, because these had given willingly, for with a single mind had offered freely to the Lord. King David also rejoiced greatly. Then David blessed the Lord. David blessed the Lord. That's interesting. In the presence of all the assembly, David said, "Blessed are you, O Lord, the God of our ancestor Israel, forever and ever. Yours, O Lord, are the greatness, the power, the glory, the victory, and the majesty. For all that is in the heavens and that is the earth is yours. Yours is the kingdom, O Lord, and you are exalted as head above all. Riches and honor come from you, and you rule over all. In your hand are power and might, and it is in your hand that make great and give strength to us all. And now, our God, we give thanks to you and praise your glorious name. But who am I? And what is my people, that we should be able to make this free will offering? For all things come from you, and of your own have given you. For we are aliens and transients before you, as were all our ancestors. Our days on the earth are like a shadow, and there is no hope. The Bible says there's no hope.
Yay! It got something right.
Our Lord, our God, all this abundance that we have provided for building you a house for your holy name comes from your hand and is all your own. It's just that we did all the work and paid out of our own pockets. I know, my God, that you search the heart and take pleasure in uprightness. Yeah, I saw that video too. In the uprightness of my heart, I have freely offered all these things, and now I have seen your people who are present here offering freely and joyously to you. O Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, our ancestors keep forever such promises, such purposes and thoughts in their hearts of your people, and direct their hearts toward you. Grant to my son Solomon that with single mind he may keep your commandments, your decrees, and your statutes, performing all of them, and that he may build the temple for which I have made provision. Then David said to the whole assembly, bless the Lord your God, because we have apparently the ability to magically enchant deities, because that makes sense.
And the assembly said, oh God, oh, you are so big, so absolutely huge. Gosh, we're all really impressed down here, I can tell you.
Yes, thank you for that. I love that quote. And all the assembly blessed the Lord, because that's a thing that can happen. And the God of their ancestors, and bowed their heads and prostrated themselves before the Lord and the king. On the next day, they offered sacrifices and burnt offerings to the Lord, 1,000 bulls, 1,000 rams, and 1,000 lambs with their libations and sacrifices in abundance for all Israel. And they ate and drank before the Lord on that day with great joy. And God wondered, why are you killing all the fucking sheep?
I like barbecue as much as the next person, but were they trying to fill the Bronze Sea with blood so they could swim in it? Because at this point,
there's a bit more.
Of course.
They made David's son Solomon king a second time. They anointed him as the Lord's prince and Zadok as priest. Then Solomon sat on the throne of the Lord, succeeding his father David as king. He prospered, and all Israel obeyed him. All the leaders and the mighty warriors, and also the sons of King David, pledged their allegiance to King Solomon. The Lord highly exalted Solomon in the sight of all Israel, bestowed upon him such royal majesty as had not been on any king before him in Israel. Thus, David, son of Jesse, reigned over all Israel. The period that he reigned over Israel was 40 years. He reigned 40 years in Hebron and 33 years in Jerusalem. He died in a good old age, full of days, riches, and honor, and his son Solomon succeeded him. Now, The acts of King David, from first to last, are written in the records of the seer Samuel, and in the records of the prophet Nathan, and in the records of the seer Gad, with accounts of all his rule and his might, and on the events that befall him in Israel, and on all of the kingdoms of the earth.
Yeah, and that last section is where we get the attribution of the books of Kings coming from what are their names? Nathan and Gad.
Nathan and
And
Gad.
all the latter
yeah.
parts of Samuel, because
Yeah.
Samuel dies before the end of the book, right?
Right, yeah.
The Chronicles of Samuel are mentioned, though. And I mean, let's face it, prophets having their words written down by their disciples after their death was kind of par for the course. That's usually what was supposed to have happened. Even the cover story was that. So, But yeah, does anyone else get the vibe that when they mention how voluntary and totally impulsive and not at all forced or planned in any way these offerings were, that they are in fact not any of those things?
How do you not really? You're enchanting a god. Oh, we're going to bless God, so we're going to magically enchant this god. So now he's got a +5 on his saving throw. What? It's God.
No, the thing is that God is so much bigger and more important than us, and so far beyond all of us, which means we really need to suck his dick a lot, because that's the most important thing to him, is to hear how important we think he is.
He's got a big dick. He needs a lot of people to suck it. Just one person won't do.
That's what I love about these Bible studies. The reverence.
We reach such firm conclusions.
I don't think he can stay firm for long. I don't have much faith in the erection of God.
Oh, Lord, come upon me.
I mean, it seems to be that in the sort like the Hebrew sense, what's translated as blessing, bracha, is more like praising, or like thanking for a specific thing sometimes.
Yeah, it would make more sense than like a blessing and curse kind of.
Like, yeah, I mean, blessing, benediction, kind of is more like you say something, a good, something you say that is good that has an effect or something like that.
Well, you know, it's just important that God feels that we all know how big and important he is.
Oh, that's I forgot. Back in the Pentateuch, we ran across places where God was actually afraid that people would curse him, as if people can cast curses, as if God could be cursed.
Well, he is kind of a punk ass little bitch, so.
Okay.
I guess it's confusing because you do have things where you're like, you know, blessed are you, God, and stuff like that. But then you also have things like, may God bless, blah blah blah. So it seems to, yeah, you could just translate it as like a spell or something. But then why does God
people can cast curses and blessings? You don't need God to do that, and God is susceptible to both types of enchantment.
I don't want to insult the Fae with the comparison, but honestly, their rules make more sense.
It should also be. I mean, I don't think that I've noted this in the commentary, but yeah, it should be noted that there is a pseudepigraphal book of Gad the Seer, which is preserved by the Black Jews of Cochin, India, actually, and there is a recent scholarly edition by Meir Bar-Ilan of Bar-Ilan University. So yeah, I actually suggested it for apocryphal.
Are the Cochin Jews the same as the Beta Israel? Not Beta Israel, the Beta Menashe or something like that.
Yeah, I think they.
Is that what they call themselves?
I think
Maybe?
so.
No, Beta Israel is Ethiopian, but
yeah, I think they identify themselves as like originating from Menashe. No, that's different. That's different. This the Bnei Menashe is Tibeto-Burmese. It's a different
group of Jews from India. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Which is still interesting that you like have.
Okay, they're also called Cochin Jews, also known as the Malabar Jews. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll start with verse 1. This palatial structure is not for man. Hebrew for palatial structure is habira. The word bira is a loanword from Akkadian biltu, which refers to a fortified town or citadel, according to Halot. The word appears 14 times outside of Chronicles in late biblical texts, like Nehemiah 2:8 and 7:2, and there it means citadel or acropolis. The word is absent for the Septuagint, which paraphrases the second half of verse 19, where this term appears first. Klein suggests that the Septuagint translator may not have known what to do with this word. And Knoppers comments, quote, in the ancient Mediterranean world, temples were built to function as residences for gods or goddesses. The various services and rituals associated with the shrine were performed on the deity's behalf. In this context, the whole cluster of buildings of which the temple is one part has acquired an aura of holiness. That the citadel belongs to Yahweh lends gravity to the preparations for construction. The author of Nehemiah 11:1 further develops this concept of holiness by describing Jerusalem itself as the holy city, in Hebrew, Il HaKodesh. In this late text, not present in Septuagint, the entire city of Jerusalem has acquired a sacred aura.
So it's a magically enchanted evening.
You could say that. And I also noted something interesting, which I didn't include in the commentary. So in Hebrew, about the marble at Laish, and I think Shaish is a hapax, but it's interesting that the Vulgate has marble of Paros, and Paros refers to an island. I don't know if that's in Greece. Yeah, it's in.
I thought Paros was in France.
Shut up.
Sorry.
Yeah.
There's a big island called Paros.
Yeah. So just interesting because Bede also calls it the island of Paros. So okay. Okay. So on verse 4, gold of Ophir. Commentators note that the reference to gold of Ophir is anachronistic. Japhet notes that according to 1 Kings 9:26 through 32:28 and 10:11, the gold of Ophir came to Judah only because of the alliance between Solomon and Hiram, king of Tyre. She asks, however, if the gold of Ophir might be another expression of the chronicler's tendency to put David and Solomon on an equal footing, making David anticipate some of the achievements otherwise attributed to Solomon. On verse 7, Darix. I think it's Darix. In Hebrew, it's Adarchonim. The word appears in Ezra 8:27, referring to a Persian gold coin, approximately weighing 8.4 grams. Elsewhere, we find drachmonim in Ezra 2:69 and Nehemiah 7:69 through 72. Commentators take the aleph in adrachonim as a prosthetic aleph. The reference to the Darix is anachronistic, given that they were in use 400 years after David and Solomon's time. Klein notes that Williamson argues that this coin provides a terminus antiquum for the date of Chronicles, since it is unlikely that this coin would be referred to much later than the Persian Empire itself. Septuagint reads gold coins, Targum zuzin, and Peshitta 200,000 of good tin for the gutters.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
you've
Pseudo
got a
Rashi
point.
thinks it's Pseudo Rashi says thinks it's the drachma, which was a Greek coin.
He uses
around the
katsonsh,
same time.
which
Yeah.
katsonsh, I think it's German, if I remember correctly.
What is?
Katsonsh.
Katsonch?
Yeah.
I think he's trying to write Old French for quinon.
I actually don't know. I don't think that's Old French actually, because if I remember correctly, Pseudo Rashi, at least according to LeYisra'el, is from Germany at least.
So he would have just used Laz, which means like language of the idolaters or something like that.
Yeah. I need to check this though. Just a reminder. Check the Wiesel on pseudo Rashi. First Chronicles 29. It's very important. Okay, Katsonj. Okay. On verse 8, Dirksen comments, quote, "The present text contains an anachronism. The tenor must be that the collected precious stones are stored until the temple is ready, to which they will then be conveyed as temple treasure." Rudolph rightly sees the reference to Yechiel as a later insertion. This passage is not about the later temple treasure, but about the resources needed to build the temple. Without this insertion, the translation would read, "Whoever gave this for building the house of Yahweh." The addition changes the incidental treasure for building the temple into the permanent temple treasure, in which the redactor took a particular interest.
Gee, I wonder why.
On verse 9, Japhet comments, quote, "One of the most significant aspects of the chronicler's concept of religiosity, quote unquote, is his view that true service of the Lord, in fact, every religious act, should entail full participation of body and soul, a harmony which he defines as with whole heart. This wholeness of intention also has an external expression, which is rejoicing, quote unquote. When a person performs any act with rejoicing, in Hebrew simcha, his heart is surely in it. The chronicler's identification of a whole heart with rejoicing is given an explicit expression in this verse, which is in fact constructed of phrases all denoting goodwill, readiness, and joy. 3 times the root rejoice, sameach, twice give willingly, nadav, and in the focal position, whole heart. This concluding verse also mentions all 3 of the participants in this joyful occasion, the people, David, and the Lord.
So it would be proper to say that I blaspheme every day with great rejoicing.
Yeah, I'm a little confused as to how you get all these positive attributes from what you've already described as an a-hole heart.
Aaron, I know Lilith doesn't allow me, but no.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to give this book the reverence it deserves.
And you're doing a fantastic job. And remember, Tomer, nobody is going to listen to our, discussions of the scholarly things if we don't at least occasionally throw in a laugh. And
of course,
for our own sake, I had to take weed. Okay, we'll have our fun.
I see. I think Isaac wanted to say something. No, okay. Sorry, I was just saying something. Okay, on 10 through 19, Klein comments, quote, "The final prayer of David consists of 3 parts. Praise of Yahweh for his riches and power in verses 10b through 12, thanksgiving for God's generosity in verses 13 through 17, and petitions for Yahweh to give the people and Solomon a perfect heart in verses 18 and 19. Each of these parts begins with some form of the vocative, to you, Yahweh, in verse 11, and now our God in verse 13, and Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel in verse 18. Altogether, there are 6 references to Yahweh and 5 to God in the prayer. The people's blessing of Yahweh in verse 20b comes in response to an edict of David in verse 20a. While there are many ties to the vocabulary of the Psalter and even some use of parallelism, the prayer itself is in prose and does not conform exactly to any of the standard genres of the Psalter. Japhet might be right in proposing that the prayers of a layperson needed to be in prose to distinguish them from the liturgical singing done by the Levitical singers, as we see in 16:8-36 and 2 Chronicles 20:21. But in any case, the chronicler has effectively used vocabulary and formulas from Israel's psalmic or liturgical traditions to construct a powerful and convincing final prayer for David.
Like when Shakespeare wrote that beautiful, beautiful speech for Henry V.
Never read it. On verse 10, praise be to you, Lord, the God of our father Israel. This second person blessing of Yahweh appears also in Psalms 119:12. Usually in the Bible, the blessing formula to Yahweh is in the third person. Knoppers writes that the formulation of this blessing, maintaining the second person address while using the personal pronoun ata, represents a shift in the post-exilic age that anticipates the direct address of synagogal prayers and blessings. He notes Towner's opinion that this change in address may indicate that Jewish liturgical customs of the synagogues standardized the that Jewish liturgical customs of the synagogue standardized the direct style of blessing that was prevalent in Jewish worship during the Persian and Hellenistic period.
Yeah,
if I remember
I was gonna
correctly,
say, like,
there
these.
synagogues were invented after the return from the exile, right? Or after at least the exile, the Babylonian
Much
exile.
later, like during I think no, actually,
Or like after the Persians let them return, which would have been post-Babylonian exile, but sort of continuous with it, more or less.
I mean, the places of learning would have maybe been established already during the exile, but I think like synagogues as like a center of prayer.
Yeah, the
I don't think
religious
that's
synagogue
really until after
system.
okay. So
really
no,
kicked off until much later. No,
there
Was
is
that after the
temple
Romans?
was destroyed. No?
Yeah, in Second Temple there already existed synagogues. I mean, there is a synagogue in Gamla in the Golan Heights, which was active until the Great Rebellion, and the Jerusalemic Talmud says that before the Second Temple destruction, there were 480 synagogues in Megillah 3:1.
Okay.
Yeah, and also there is a inscription by Sorry.
I guess. I mean, I think I'm wondering if the definition of synagogue includes like, Bet Knesset or, like a place of learning as opposed to a place of prayer. I don't know if they. Yeah, I'm actually not sure when like group prayer.
No, I don't think there's no indication that there is the synagogues had like prayers in it, right? Just only after the Second Temple destruction, then the synagogue started having more problems.
The structure
I think after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai Ribas, there is also a Theodotus inscription which also talks about the synagogue. It's Theodotus, son of Vetinus, priest and head of the synagogue, son of the head of the synagogue, and grandson of the head of the synagogue. Built the synagogue for the reading of the law and for the teaching of the commandments, as well as the guest room, the chambers, etc. And this is around before 70 CE. Okay. On verse 15, foreigners and strangers. In Hebrew, gerim and toshavim. Knoppers comments, quote, in many texts, a ger is someone without inherited rights, originally at least, a newcomer or outsider. In Chronicles, such gerim have immediate status. Earlier, the Israelite ancestors were presented as sojourning gerim in Canaan, as we see in 16:19 and Psalms 105:12. Here, the Israelites themselves are presented as resident aliens before God, as all of our ancestors were. The metaphorical application of ger status to those gathered in the National Assembly underscores the transiency of life before God, as we see in Psalms 39:12, 144:3 and 4, Job 8:8 and 9, and 14:1 and 2. The use of the metaphor is no doubt connected to David's own situation. The transition to Solomon's reign, 1 Chronicles 21, verses 1:20 through 25, and the imminent end of David's life, verses 26 to 30, become the occasion to reflect on human mortality. There's also an interesting an interesting bit in Targum which reads, for we are sojourners and you are with you and temporal residents, as were all our fathers, like the shadow of a bird which flies in the air of the heavens, so are our days upon the earth. There is no hope for a son of man that he should live forever.
Yeah, that's the traditional idea of like and there is no hope that you will not die. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's mentioned in Pseudo Rashi as well. So, Pseudo Rashi Kimchi, based on Job 14:5. Yeah. Okay. On 20, prostrating themselves before the Lord and the King. Klein comments, quote, the only unexpected thing in this verse is the prostration before the king. One might argue that the assembly had followed David twice already in this chapter by donating to the temple, verses 6 to 9. and by blessing Yahweh in this verse, and that therefore they would naturally honor him by prostrating themselves before him as well. Onan had previously prostrated himself to David, 1 Chronicles 21:21, aka 2 Samuel 24:20, and the officials of Judah will later do the same to Joash in 2 Chronicles 24:17. It is proper to prostrate themselves before the king, since he sits on Yahweh's throne. This act also implies popular endorsement of David's plans and his generosity. The first celebration is for the completion of preparations for the temple before the people turn to the inauguration of the new king. On verse 21, on the next day, several commentators note the issue with the reference to the next day, which is a Bowie album. Dirksen writes that its position in between the sacrifices is surprising, and that the sacrifices do not take place until the following day, and not as a festive conclusion on the day itself. Moreover, these words jar with the emphatic on that day in verse 22, which must refer to the festive day of this chapter. Japhet suggested that on the next day is a later insertion by someone who did not want the sacrifices to precede the coronation of Solomon. Klein, however, asks that if this is the case, why would the editor not shift the whole verse to make that clearer? He notes that Brown and Divrey connect the communion sacrifices to the prayers of David and the people on the previous day, putting the burnt offerings on the second day. However, this would be an odd distribution of the two kinds of sacrifices to separate the day. He concludes, quote, "Perhaps we should admit that we have insufficient reasons to change the text and conclude that the chronicler has used his temporal reference awkwardly." On 22, Tzadok the priest. Japhet comments, quote, "The mention of the anointing of Tzadok as high priest is surprising in several aspects. Except for the initial anointing of Aaron and his sons by Moses in the wilderness, which was to be, quote, a perpetual priesthood throughout their generations, end quote, in Exodus 40:15, there is no biblical evidence from either the first or the second temple of the consecrating of priests by anointing. Moreover, in contrast to Solomon, who was only now ascending David's throne, Tzadok was only counting the priestly role already conferred upon him previously. It would seem, therefore, that the reference to the consecration of Tzadok is intended to signify that on one and the same day, the two hereditary lines of Israel's leadership were irrevocably determined for all time, with Solomon representing the house of David and Tzadok the house of Aaron. Tzadok is thus given extremely significant status as a counterpart of Solomon, a phenomena which is well illustrated in the period of the Restoration, when the secular and religious leaders cooperated in guiding the people, Zerubbabel and Joshua, Nehemiah and Ezra.
It's always an interesting and somewhat terrifying mix of power, the balance between secular and sacred, and their attempts to both cooperate and subvert each other.
Yeah, it does seem like another David was the one who promoted the Zadokite priesthood.
Yeah, but it was prophecy built in. It's where they put the emphasis. They have to keep, because you can't totally undermine the other's power. You have to keep both as sacred because they lean on each other, but you want to, prop yourself up a bit more. It's very Divine Right of Kings was pretty fucked up. Good to know it wasn't new.
Okay, on 26 through 28, Dirksen comments, quote, "Verse 26 with the characteristic all Israel is by the chronicler's own hand, while verses 27 forward have been taken from 1 Kings 2:11 forward. The latter passage, too, mentions only the period without reference to the limited rule over Judah in the first years, in contrast to 2 Samuel 5:5. The mention of the long sojourn in Hebron does not accord with the story that David immediately captured Jerusalem after accepting his kingship in 11:4-8. This merely reminds us that the chronicler does not deny the information in DH, rather assumes it to be known, but sometimes makes this information subservient to his own themes." And finally, on 29, Knoppers comments, quote, "The reference is not unique. Prophetic compositions are cited elsewhere in 2 Chronicles 9:29, 12:15, 13:20, 22, etc. Do these citations refer to prophetic, analytic, midrashic, or biblical traditions? Or are the prophetic source citations merely a literary convention? Of the various possibilities, the prophetic stories of Samuel and Kings are the most likely source because almost all of the prophets who appear in the Chronicles citations are found within these books. Two of those who do not, Iddo and Hosea, may be derived from source material within Samuel Kings. Moreover, the Chronicles accounts of these prophets do not contain any additional material to that which appears in Samuel Kings. The prophetic source citations found in the concluding formulas of 2929 resemble the editorial superscriptions of two prophetic books, Jeremiah, in Hebrew Divrey Yirmiyahu, and Amos, Divrey Amos. This may suggest that the author drew upon the editorial superscriptions of these books in composing his prophetic source citations. Yeah, and that's it.
No Christians this time?
No Christians. There's only B.
Crowning of Solomon and everything.
Aaron, you're muted.
Are we going to try to run through 2nd Chronicles and finish that up today?
Oh yeah, I mean, sure. It's only wait.
It's only dozens of pages.
We can beat them easily. There's only 150 of them.
So are we meeting again on Saturday? Not this Saturday.
Yes.
But
Not in
Saturday.
2 days, but in a week.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, then. Closing comments, Lawrence?
Yes, closing comments. So tomorrow, or hell, you know what? Maybe even tonight, depending on how things go, I'll have a video out talking about the 10 Commandments bill in Texas, which there's a whole bunch of shit that no one's talking about that I'm very excited to tell the people. Some of them I shared in the Discord as I was discovering them. So that's going to be coming out either later today or tomorrow. And you should also join the Discord, by the way, if you're not in it. Listen, if you don't join the Discord and subscribe to Milwaukee Atheists, Aaron is going to go to your place and punch you in the face. And I don't think you want that. So make sure to do those things.
In all fairness, now no one is going to go to the Discord anymore, Lawrence. That wasn't the flex you thought it was.
I think, yeah,
Fine.
having
Peter is going to go punch you in the face. And that'll be embarrassing for you.
People who know me know that that's not a flex either.
No. It's a threat.
how about I won't come to your house and sass you with my crop if you don't. Anyway.
Otherwise, I guess that's all the things.
Yeah, and if anybody desperately needs a dog, I have another one. Yeah, my wife and I were sitting we just rehomed a Rottweiler that we've been keeping for like 3 months. Got her spayed, got her all their shots, all of that kind of thing, and we just got a home for her where she's very happy. Where somebody is retired and has no other animals. They just lost a Rottweiler to cancer, and they get our Rottweiler puppy, and it's such a happy moment. All of that. We're glad we did that, and then like 2 days later. And we're sitting in an outdoor restaurant, and this stray dog wanders up to us looking pathetic. And next thing you know, I'm back to 6 dogs again. Yeah. No collar, no chip. Yep. Yeah. What we've got is that there's been a rash of people that are just, they can't turn the dogs into the shelters or whatever, because 1, they're kill shelters, and 2, they're full up. So what people have been doing, for whatever reason, and maybe there's a problem with the economy and I'm not aware of it, but they just take collars off and leave the dog on the street. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I
So I did a short video about that, looking for a home for this dog. I'm probably going to make another video about it because it's a little more urgent for this guy. Anyway, I got a comment from Joe Cool, who says, Aaron Ra, I guess that means here. I hear you are not going to make the ARC protest. If this is true, it makes me sad that I won't get to see you interact with Hovind. Yeah, my wife has a family thing that she has to do. They scheduled it for the 4th of July, so there's going to be holiday conflicts. So,
oh yeah, speaking of something like that, at least, so Pride started today. Pride Fest, in Milwaukee
Yes.
started, and
Yeah.
there are always preachers outside, and I'm trying to find a day to go down there and when I can have someone with me with a camera, because I want to dunk on the preachers. I want to cook them in every single thing they think they understand.
That sounds delightful.
Creatures. I thought you
Just
said
for the
creatures.
and
record,
you will have multiple cameramen.
Yeah, they should note that today there was a march, a pride march in Jerusalem.
good.
Yeah.
Did it go
Well,
safely?
just for everyone of note, I am not straight when those preachers are around. If you are someone who kissing me would piss them off, we can do it. I am not trying to steal your girlfriends, ladies. I'm just trying to piss off the preachers. So if you are a woman, if you are visibly non-binary, even in some cases, if you're just like more tanned persuasion and they be getting their panties in a twist, I will absolutely make out with anyone because fuck those guys.
Did you see the what is her name? Lady Gaga walking up into a concert venue, and somebody on the other side of the railing yelled that she was going to hell. So Lady Gaga turned, grabbed this woman by the face, kissed her full on the mouth, and said, "Now you're going too."
Yeah, I saw that. Oh, that was iconic. Iconic. And someday, when we're having a little fun, because it's a bit of a story, I'll tell you how I used my heterosexual dissatisfaction to troll the Westboro Baptist Church.
Okay. All right. Next week, then?
Into 2 Chronicles.
Wait. Hold on a second. I am overlooking something important. Damn it, I did it again. Yeah, this Saturday, Tomer can't make it. Next Saturday, I can't make it.
Oh,
Saturday,
oh my God.
Next Saturday, I'm going to be in Des Moines.
We'll have to do another Thursday, maybe. I don't know.
Well, that's a problem for me Thursday because I have something.
Well, we'll all stop doing things.
We'll figure something out. But you got to get an email chain because I'm sorry, I'm not going to be here next week. I keep forgetting these things.
You got Snake Appreciation Days in Israel, Tomer? That's new.
No, I have something else to attend to because I'm trying to socialize.
He's appreciating the.
I'm almost finishing my masters. I'm almost finishing my masters, for fuck's sakes. I can have time to celebrate, right? I can have time for drugs, right?
Yeah, that is true. Hey, as long as you're doing drugs, that's fine by me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good drugs.
We'll figure something out. We'll see you sometime next week. Bye-bye.
Love to all.
Bye, everybody.